I was like, am I the only one here? The music's starting to wind down. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sunday show. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, the wonderful, lovely, talented, brilliant Seth Anders. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Good to see you. Good to be back.
We are in, I don't know, week 3 or whatever of my year of Zen. I'm not going to keep doing like I mentioned the other day, I'm not just going to pretend that I only know language and logic and I don't know anything about religion because it's not all that helpful. But I am going to be asking more questions. This is your chance to call in and explain what you believe and why you think we should believe as well. Can you do that? It's one of those things where, I've done this for many, many years, and all we're really looking for, and trust me, there's technical stuff, there's delays, there's the need to pause and get clarification. But by and large, if you can explain fairly simply without requiring degrees in 23 things with special jargon and 28 long stories about your past and personal experiences, what you believe in. Do you believe in a God? Which God? Why? How do you know that it's real? How can we know that it's real? Are your reasons that you think other people should share? Can you explain this in a way that people can understand? And I'll let you know in advance. Really, you just need to tell us what you believe, why you think we should believe it as well, and slow down because it's not a race. I guarantee you're going to get to speak a lot more if you pause and leave space for questions and corrections and confusion. And a couple of quick things, because it's my year is in, that means Seth will be your bad cop today. But also, nothing about your personal reason for believing God has anything to do with what Seth and I believe, what we used to believe, what we currently believe, what would convince us. None of that. You have your reasons for why you believe, and we're just trying to figure out what they are and whether or not we should share them. So the lines are open, 720-619-2288. Seth, you just got back from the Ark Encounter thing with Noah and a bunch of folks up there. I saw some footage. You and I did that years ago, but how'd it go this year?
Well, it's funny. When you and I were there, we toured the Ark Encounter. And it was the 10-year anniversary of Ken Ham's $110 million paperweight. And a lot of people gave me some shit for protesting. They're like, well, why bother? Why can't you just leave him alone? Does it really make any difference? And, I feel like it's kind of a naive question. Why would you ridicule the ridiculous when the ridiculous is doing so much harm? And it's probably partially because I really take it personally. I was indoctrinated. And you and I both toured the Ark. I toured the Creation Museum. Have you been through that one? Maybe on a separate occasion?
I have not.
But quite often you see tours of private and home schools. And so very young, impressionable kids who are wowed by dinosaur animatronics and have been sort of force-fed this biblical worldview, which says they were born unworthy and they have to be saved from the awful person that they are. And then they're into this crazy distrust of science and scientists and the anti-science propaganda. And the fact that Ken Ham sold the Ark in concept, he sold the idea to the state of Kentucky as a business to get those financial incentives. And then he sold it as a church to get freaking church tax breaks. And he's playing both sides. And so we just went out and I mean, it was a good day. It was tough. We had some tech issues at the beginning and then a torrent of rain. But what was interesting, Matt, is that when we were setting up, a bunch of cars showed up and people with brown shirts got out with their own camera gear. They worked for Ken Ham's Ark Encounter. And they had come, so we're chronicling ourselves. They came to chronicle us. And I was like, okay. So what are they going to do with the footage? I don't know. But I found myself on camera on one of their cameras for 15 minutes in the pouring rain with an apologist, Matt. And it was just as bad as you would think it is. I mean,
Yeah, and yet you did 15 minutes.
I, honestly, part of it was I had a mic on a condenser mic, and it got ruined in the rain because I wasn't prepared for the weather. I didn't have an umbrella. I mean, I'm standing in the rain, so I mean, the audio took it just like it's unintelligible. Ironically, God's crew is the only one that got good audio from the exchange. But a lot of it's an exercise for me. You debate more than I do. And, I'm going to sharpen that knife just a little bit. I was hoping that maybe some of the people who were running the gear, some of these 20-somethings with the mics and the cameras might be watching and listening. And maybe there's a seed of doubt. The guy was just insulting. How can you even call it genocide? We had that big banner up. This is Genocide and Incest Park. How can you even call it genocide? By what moral standard would you be able to define genocide?
Yeah, to be fair, generally, when we see genocide now, it's targeting of one particular group of people by another group of people. In this case, it was just we're going to wipe out everybody but a drunk and his sons and their families, and that's it.
I think I mentioned too, who wrote the story of Noah's Ark? Well, it was Moses. Well, how do you know that? And he pinballs around how hundreds of historians documented the existence that there was a Moses. And I blew it on the spot. I wish I had been thinking, but I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So Moses writes the book of Genesis, but Genesis starts before space-time, before the cosmos is created, before any of the stars and the sun and the planets and the water and the animals and the human kind. Like, he wasn't the first human, so what? Like, he was somehow born before space-time and he lived in a little space capsule with his pen and parchment and he chronicled what was going on. How did he come by this information? I missed that one. And we just went point by point by point. But I'll tell you the part that drove me crazy. Because I was trying to explain to him that I was a devout believer, man. I was in the faith for a hell of a long time. And I was a genuine article. And when we were done, I was trying to excuse myself because Noah was about to speak and I didn't want to miss it. And he steps right into me. He steps right into me as I'm trying to retreat. And he said, I don't believe you ever had a covenant relationship with Jesus Christ. So I'm like, well, excuse me? I don't believe you ever had a covenant relationship with Jesus Christ. So I wasn't a true Christian? I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Never said that. I said, you never had a covenant relationship with Jesus. Okay, you're saying I didn't do Christianity right. I never said that. Never said that. Well, hang on just a second. If true Christianity is having a covenant relationship with Jesus Christ, and I did not have that, then I did not do Christianity correctly. The guy was just so freaking slick, right? So slimy. And I looked at him, I'm like, you have no idea probably how insulting that you have just been. You weren't there. You don't know anything about me. You weren't there when I was 9 years old and I walked up to the altar at Eastwood Baptist Church and dropped to my knees with almost tears in my eyes, begging God to save me and forgive me of my sin and to live in my heart and to take me to heaven. I mean, you have no idea. You're just trying to discredit the witness here. You know, you're trying to invalidate my own experience. By the time I peeled myself away, he was imploring me, you need to come back to Jesus. You desperately need the risen Lord. Please return to God. And by the time I get out of there, my blood is boiling because I thought this man just essentially tried to invalidate me without even knowing me. And that's another reason why I think we have to protest, because these people are doing it to adults and children 24/7, 365, you know, so.
It's incredibly common. You get people who are willing to debate on evidence, and then there's people who want to share their testimony. And then when they find out they're up against somebody who knows, as you and I do, the ins and outs of at least some versions of Christianity, and that we might know the doctrines and the Bible well enough for them to just not be able to say, look, the book says and leave it at that. They'll do the attacks, and it's, oh, you were never a true Christian. And when I've gotten them to actually define what a true Christian is, maybe if they'd said, hey, I don't think you ever had a covenant relationship with Jesus, I'd say, you're right. And I don't think anybody else does or has either. I don't think there's any possibility of a covenant relationship with Jesus. But if you mean, was I convinced that I had that relationship? Yes, I was. And so was my church. So much so that former deacons from my church who thought I was going to be a pastor showed up when I was an atheist at debates that I did against Christians on the resurrection to ask me publicly what happened. Now, I don't think there's such a thing as a true Christian. And so I'm going to agree with you that I wasn't one. But I was as much of one as anybody you're ever going to meet, and as much of one as you think you are. Can you demonstrate, sir, that you have a covenant relationship with Jesus? No? Well, I guess we're stuck. By the way, if you're out there waiting to call in, not only is it 720-619-2288, but there's a link down below this for call-in studio if you want to call in from a mobile device or a web browser or whatever else. Do you have a covenant relationship with Jesus Christ, and can you demonstrate that? Can you teach us what it is? What did Seth and I miss? Because Seth got saved at the age of 9 in a Baptist church. I got saved at the age of 5 in a Baptist church, Gashland Baptist Church on right North Oakberry Road in Gladstone, Missouri. Did we do it wrong? I mean, and I wasn't just, I walked down the aisle and boom, that was it. No, I was surrounded. My family were Christians. My mom helped convert the Catholic side of my family to Protestantism, to being Southern Baptist. I was active in the church all the time, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, maybe not Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. I went to mission trips and church Camp Windermere, Lake of the Ozarks. I did all that stuff. And then I was active in the youth ministry. And everybody thought that I was going to be a preacher, including me. Now, it's possible that I was deceived, but nobody seemed to know it, including me. And so I guess one of the things is, if I know that the Bible says that God's basically the only one that knows whose name is actually written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So all of you out there who are pronouncing who is or isn't a true Christian, you are actively in opposition to biblical teaching that is like undeniable, straightforward. Oh, you'll know them by their fruits. Yes, that's how you're supposed to be able to tell who is actively working on behalf of God. But none of you know whose name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Just like none of you know when God's coming back, even though you guys keep saying it's any day now, any day now, any day now, any day now, any century now, any millennia now. Anybody listening now? Because we've heard all this stuff. But I want to know.
Oh, I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
But no, I just want to know what could Seth and I have done differently? What should we have done different? And what should we do now? Because that guy's telling you need to come back. But he just basically said you were never here. So how can you come back to something you were never a part of?
Mom was Pentecostal. They believed in her church you could lose your salvation, right? You go far enough off the trail and then you're lost again. But the Baptists, where I went to school and church, they were like eternal security, once saved, always saved. Well, if that's the case, even though I've been an atheist activist for 17 years, apparently I'm still going to heaven. So what did I guess I got the best of both worlds. I mean, if I die and I got it wrong, I still get to enjoy an eternity in paradise, which doesn't really sound like paradise. But back to you weren't a true Christian. And I know you've spoken a lot about this. We're surrounded by people who say, well, my flavor of Christianity is true Christianity, right? Hashtag true Christianity. So you got the fundies over here, and they say, no, we're biblical literalists. Everybody else has watered it down. They're not true Christians. Then you got the progressives, and they're writing all these books about how Jesus would never judge gay people and would never want a Christian nation and how there's no hell. And we're true Christians, and the other people have distorted God. And you got the spiritual people who say, I don't care what a book says, it's a relationship. Jesus lives in my heart. I'm doing true Christianity. And I think to myself, they are all Christians. You know, I mean, they can try to invalidate the other ones, but I mean, they're accepting Jesus, the Christian God, as their God. I call them Christians, but it's interesting to see this internal squabbling about what a Christian actually is. If I and the experts the same freaking way, I put 50 apologists in a room, experts, seminary graduates, 50
Yep.
year pastors, and just put them in a room, and I asked them the basics. Hey, was it a literal 6 day creation, or was 6 days like a metaphor for millions of years? Was there a little literal Adam and Eve, or was that a story we're supposed to learn from? Was it a real global flood? Was there a flood? Was it regional? Did it cover the earth? How long? What did they stay on the ark? The nature of miracles, speaking in tongues, is that relevant for today or not? How do you baptize? Immersion? Do you dab? Is it birth? Is it age of accountability? Do you use water? Do you use oil? Do you get the Holy Spirit at the moment of salvation? Or is that a separate prayer? You know, it just, you can go, is there a hell? Is it the grave? Is it annihilation? What are the end times? So you post-trib, a-trib, pre-trib? Well, what's your model for all of these experts doing true Christianity can agree on the basics of their faith,
Well,
and you put them all together, and it's Thunderdome. It's almost a comedy, and I find it
well,
interesting. So,
we might get an answer right about now. I've actually had pastors tell me, more than one, that they, once saved, always saved, they're going to see me in heaven. And I'm like, how on earth can you be satisfied that somebody out here actively working in opposition to the God that you serve is going to sit in heaven with you while other people you love are going to burn in hell or whatever it is? So let's find out maybe a little bit about hell and damnation or whatever else, because our first caller for today is Magdalene, she, they pronouns. Uh, Magdalene's from the Eastern Orthodox Universalist doctrine. So, Magdalene, it says here you think Christianity is still good, but you're opposed to damnation theology. How are you, and what's going on?
Well, I am a Eastern Orthodox practicing trans woman in the Pacific Northwest. So you can imagine that I have had to both find very unique ways to practice my faith and the circumstances in which I probably arrived to my current location. So that's one day they're going to invent an answer for that question of how you're doing.
can you explain
Okay.
that denomination to me? I'm not familiar.
Yes, sir, I can. So we are a very small. This is like the equivalent of tent making ministry. It's four of us, a priest who was under a small denomination of Catholics who don't follow Rome, and other Christian religious who are trying to reclaim both apostolic succession and the liturgy and other things that are important to Christians of different traditions. But we also do that in the context of accepting that Christ never spoke of damnation. That is an invention of the later Roman Empire. You first see it in Christians being persecuted in the persecutions. At the latter end of the persecutions, I think it's Saint Athanasius who tells the persecuted that the persecutors will be punished. But if you read Paul, he says that did God make some vessels only fit for destruction, but it not be so? Because he's wrestling with the idea that he, as not just a Jewish man, but as somebody incredibly versed in the law, he was despairing over the divide and the slow separation of Christianity away from Judaism and Judaic practice. And so he had to come to some kind of peace with that. And I believe, based on his argumentation and the attestations of other saints and early Christians like Origen, that universalism, either openly declared or assumed, was the active doctrine for most denominations up until the year 1000 AD.
Okay, let me jump
so
in
yeah.
real fast. Well, Paul himself spoke of judgment. And I think it's in Corinthians when he was talking about homosexuality, and those people would not achieve the kingdom of heaven. I think we're talking about the Bible saying there is no one worthy, no, not one. This is not a universalist acceptance by God. We see, depart from me, you who are cursed, into a lake of everlasting fire and damnation,
Matthew
prepared
25,
for the
41,
devil and
and
his
46.
angels. And from the first chapter of the book of Genesis, and we're not going to write off the Old Testament simply because Jesus wasn't there.
Jesus was a Jewish rabbi who followed Rabbi
Christianity,
Ben
if I may, Christianity is a dominionist religion, right? Adam is given dominion over all the earth. If you look through the Old Testament, those are essentially Christian dominionist wars, even genocide. The Great Commission is a dominionist philosophy, right? And it's not universalism.
Well, so
it is go out and make them Christians.
If I may interject, I am more than happy to discuss, the scripture with you. I come from a Pentecostal background, and Eastern Orthodoxy in the form that I practice it is a part of my deconstruction. If you would like to ask more about the logic of my beliefs versus how I verify it in Scripture, the Bible is not holy to me. It is a group of documents. What is holy is the living presence of God in every human being as it's revealed in all of the ways we love and live and help
I'm not
each other.
trying to invalidate your journey. All I'm saying is, and I think this is not unfair, it sounds to me like you've created a religion or a God in your own image, or one that serves your own value system. And that has to separate from the literal tenets of Christianity and the Bible to exist.
I think that's a Christian interpretation. Like you are taking the evangelical Christian position as the default Christian position, when evangelicalism is itself, whether Americans want to admit it or not, a heresy. American Christianity is mostly abominable.
I'm sorry, Magdalene, but if you're going to toss out the Bible and you're going to mess with, like, for example,
I don't know why.
Can I finish?
Yes, sir.
If you're going to toss out the Bible because you think the Bible is not as important or not that important or not instructive, and you care about the living presence of God, you said Jesus didn't say anything about damnation. And yet in Matthew 25, he specifically does. And so are you just throwing out those verses as Jesus didn't say that?
No, sir. I'm disagreeing with the translations that you're reading, and I'm disagreeing with the American-centered and Western-centered framing of Christianity. Christianity
I'm sorry, but the words mean what the words mean.
America and outside of and also there is the fact that it traditionally, this idea of worshiping the Bible, of treating it as like a holy living voice of God, is a relatively new construction.
Yes, you are thoroughly indoctrinated into your new made up version, and you want to dismiss it as American religion. Well, the thing is, I'm not just reading.
I think that you're being
I'm sorry.
And I think that you're not getting my ideas.
I'm sorry.
But
I'm not just
I appreciate
reading.
that you're angry.
I'm sorry.
I hope that your day goes well, and thank you very much.
Are you running away?
I hope you have a good day.
Are you running away? You're running away. Wow.
I guess we're back to what's true Christianity. Of course, was it Christianity or is it universalism? I think I heard the God that lives inside all of us. I can't remember exactly. I hope I'm not being unfair. But
I took notes.
There is, Pavlovitz does this and a few others, where like Jesus never condemned gay people. And I'm like, okay, well, now we're going to talk about all of the other writings in the Bible have now been invalidated because there's not a certain quote by the Christ that apparently says this, but the Christ and his Father and the Holy Spirit had in the instructional manual for the entire religion all kinds of instructions, commands. The word command, the word obedience is throughout the Bible. And so this idea that even if it existed in an incorrect translation, we have to ask God why he would allow a distorted, aberrated, destructive, wrong version of his message to proliferate for thousands of years, right?
Yeah. So Magdalene is in the process of deconstructing and has bought into, sorry, a complete load of bullshit where you toss out all the inconvenient things in the Bible that might be incredibly difficult for, especially for somebody who's trans. And you buy into this notion that what's important is the living presence of God in every human being. Except that, and she wouldn't let us get to that. I wanted to find out, how can we demonstrate that there is, in fact, a living presence of God in every human being? How do we know that you're not just making this up and being comforting? And when you say things like Jesus didn't mention damnation, well, I have to look at the Bible. And it's not just an American English translation. I'm looking at it, in this case, in Greek, and looking at the words for punishment, and everlasting punishment, and everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels, as Matthew 25:41 and Matthew 25:46. But there's a bunch of other verses. Now, whether or not there's a literal hell is a subject of much debate amongst Christian theologians. Billy Graham, who famously went to seminary alongside Fred Phelps. Fred Phelps believed in a literal hell, and Billy Graham believed in annihilation theory, that essentially you will be separated from God forever.
I didn't know that. I always thought Billy Graham was a fundy. I learned something new today.
I think it was later that he got away from the doctrine of hell, once he got more popular in his meeting with presidents. And
sorry, I didn't mean
this
to derail you,
happens.
but it was like a light bulb.
Some people,
wow, okay,
yeah, some people end up softening. But the thing is, I had all these questions for Magdalene, like, okay, you think Christianity is good, cool, but do you think it's true? And if so, how can we tell? And if you're willing to throw out the Bible when it's inconvenient and just say, well, Jesus never mentioned this, when in the Bible he clearly does, well, that's the Americanized yes, you've been sold a bill of goods. You haven't studied the Bible in Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew. You haven't looked into the history of this. You haven't looked at, I will say that the doctrine of hell doesn't seem to exist within Judaism. And so that seems to be an invention within Christianity. But instead of having any kind of conversation about how you abandon all of this and justify it, she just ran. And she also said, well, if you listen to what Paul says, okay, why should we take Paul in the Bible over Jesus in the Bible? And why should we care what either of them say? Where's the reason to care what the Bible says? How do you demonstrate the living presence of God in every human being? This was a terrified individual. And I genuinely, Magdalene, thanks for calling, and feel free to call back if you want to have further conversations. But I'd also recommend that you reach out to recoveringfromreligion.org, because from what I'm seeing in the decades of doing this, you are flailing around looking for some version of religious comfort that allows you to stay seemingly tied to the religion you were raised in or previously held, and yet not feel problematically condemned for being who you are. And that is a recipe. While you're running around, by the way, pronouncing other people and other views heresies, they're going to be pronouncing you heresies. So would somebody call in and let us know, how do we tell what is heretical and what's not? Because Magdalene clearly has an idea of what's heretical, and it differs very much from what I held as heretical when I was a Southern Baptist and an occasional near Pentecostal. But I don't wish her any ill will. I understand stuff like this difficult. I was just really surprised that somebody who was brave enough to be the first caller to call in and defend something offered no defense and just kept trying to talk over us anytime we had something to say.
I get frustrated when Jesus is let off the hook. I mean, the narrative is the Old Testament Yahweh, he's the bad cop. Jesus was the good cop. All right. And I narrated a book for an ex-pastor, Dr. David Madison called 10 Things Christians Wish Jesus Hadn't Taught. But he's got a whole website with like hundreds of things like this on his website. I think the website is Things Christians Wish Jesus Hadn't Taught. If you Google that, he's got a whole list of things. But it's a myth that Jesus was always awesome and it was the Old Testament God, Jesus's dad, who was the asshole. Jesus was the one who came. He said in Matthew, I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword. I'm going to turn families against each other. He's telling people, I want you to drop everything you're doing and follow me. Don't even go home and say bye to your families. Yeah, I'm not, aren't you a true believer in me? Why would you be focused on other things? He gave bad advice throughout the New Testament. He compared a woman to a dog in one of the stories. He just, time and time again. And then we can't divorce Jesus from the verses about obedience or else. The message in Christianity is, you must obey me and trust not in your own understanding. Shut your brain off. You are not worthy. You require redemption. The Jesus story itself is an indictment. We must look at it as a moral failing. Jesus had to come and become a bloody meat pinata to rescue us from the torture chamber or the annihilation or the separation or the judgment or whatever that Jesus himself was responsible for. And so when I see, and there's a whole genre of these progressive Christian books that have come out, and I'm so thankful for the hearts behind it.
Yes.
They're selling Christianity that seems to be a religion made in their own image, and it makes me kind of crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like, because at one point she was like, oh, I'll be happy to discuss, views on scripture with you. And I'm like, but if you're going to say Jesus didn't say this, not only is there the passage in Matthew, but there's John 5:28 and 29, which is basically saying the hour is coming when the graves will open and the dead will hear his voice and rise, and those that have done good under the resurrection of life, and those that have done evil under the resurrection of damnation. I mean, you can say that resurrection of damnation is not a hell, but if you're against damnation theology, I mean, you're literally using the same word. And I don't know. It's not just, and it's embarrassing to do it as Americanized, as if the concept of hell isn't much older than 250 years.
I get a little frustrated as well as we wait for the switchboard to populate. We'd love for you to call and explain, defend God, whatever. You can condemn us. We would be ready. But, the first time I ever showed my face as an atheist, I was sort of behind the scenes for 2 years as I was extricating myself from a highly religious background. But I wanted to be a part of the conversation. So I was hosting the Thinking Atheist website and podcast anonymously. I just mentioned my first name, but nobody saw my face from 2009 to the summer of 2011. And that it's the first time I ever met Matt. It was at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention in Tulsa. It was the first time I ever, I stood on stage. Hello, world. I'm Seth. Nice to meet you. And it was a big deal. And that was at a Universalist church. It was a Unitarian Universalist church. And they were nothing but kind and welcoming, and I have nothing but good things to say about them in that regard. But they're frustrating to me, Matt, because I think their tent is so open that they become gun shy about looking at some untruth and saying with confidence, that's bullshit, and we shouldn't be spreading it. I had a Universalist minister on 10, 12 years ago on the show, and I asked her point blank, I said, well, I appreciate your open tent and that you don't want to judge anybody and you want to hear a ton of different perspectives. Right. I get it. But are you ever prepared to see someone walk in with a demonstrably wrong position and say, I'm sorry, but that is demonstrably wrong? Are you prepared to say that? And she totally dodged. She's like, well, these are lively questions, Seth. And, those are conversations that we do have and wrestle with in the church. And I'm like, well, if it's wrong, it's wrong, right? At what
Yeah.
point does the open tent become so open that you become part of the problem? I don't know. Have you ever had that conversation about universalism?
Yeah. Um, the old joke of your mind's so open your brain fell out.
Yeah.
But I love that. These are difficult questions. These are lively questions. That's a good question. Okay, I'm aware that I don't care whether you think it's a good question or a lively question. I want to know what your answer is. And
Yeah.
when your answer is that's a good question or a lively question, that tells me right off the bat, you do not have an answer to this. And you know that that's a problem. And you'd rather deflect and be like, oh, that's a complicated subject. It might be, and it's an embarrassment that in many cases the church has no resolution for this, which is why, despite the fact that they are all pointing to the same being as their God, there are thousands of denominations that disagree on every single point of doctrine, including whether or not there's damnation, whether there's hell, whether or not it's okay to be gay, whether or not you're going to. By the way, there's one of my favorite debates I ever saw, and we've got a caller lined up here, which we'll go to right after this. Um, Matt Slick debated Jesse. I've forgotten his last name. Sorry. I always forget it. I don't know why. It's because I know Matt. But they were debating on soteriology. What must you do to be saved? And it's a confusing bit of doctrine, because there's a lot of different verses that suggest different things. Matter of fact, the verse that I just read from John chapter 5, verse 28 suggests that those who have done good will be raised to eternal life, as if doing good is the criteria for getting eternal life. And the people who are like, no, 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 it's not about doing good, although James talks a lot about works and that faith without works is void. But the people who want to spin it are being like, what it means by doing good, it's those that are redeemed and washed in the blood and, blah, blah, blah. And so that's the definition of good there, not just the simple good. And I'm like, okay, whichever one's true, why hasn't God made that clear? If the Bible says God's not the author of confusion, and your book is so confused that you can't answer questions about, hey, if somebody comes in with something that's demonstrably wrong, are you going to call them out on it? Well, maybe I need to pull the plank out of my own eye first, Seth.
Yeah. Well, at some point, it becomes the equivalent of Joe Rogan just wanting to have conversations. Yeah. If you see it as a meme, you're like, wow, that's amazing. And then if you scratch past the tiny veneer, you're like, that's just bullshit. At some point, you're amplifying untrue ideas. You're planting seeds that could germinate into some destructive behaviors and distract from living in the real world. I don't mind disagreements. I think we can have debates. I think we can even engage people who might have bad ideas. But this sort of equal treatment of perspectives in the spirit of acceptance, it becomes a bit problematic. And but I do appreciate the heart, but behind the Unitarian Universalist, I'm a little concerned that truth has been removed from the culture. That's a problem for me.
And the queer friendly churches that I call out regularly, they're all better people than the book or the God or anything that's part of the orthodox version of the religion. Which I guess leads us to this call. I was asking, if somebody can tell us how we can spot what's heresy and what's not, and whether or not Magdalen's heretical. But William is a theist, pronouns are he, him, calling to explain what orthodoxy is. Hey, William, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Had your third person of your all Trinity over the other night for pizza, Aaron Ra. He was with a bunch of Christians, so it was a pretty good little chat we had with him. So he
You
has
had
views
Aaron
of
for
Jesus.
pizza?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he came over
sorry.
for pizza. We live in the same city, yeah. And he said that Jesus will, like Kenneth Copeland, that he wanted money. And I'm thinking, he didn't even have a place to lay his head. He was just the opposite of that. So it's so bad that people thought he might Well, the Jesus seminar thinks he was a cynic, not someone that's cynical. It's someone that lives off the lay of the land, doesn't have possessions, that sort of thing. So, we have some disagreements there.
So
But as
you're not a
far,
Christian.
go ahead. No, but as far I know about Orthodox, as far as Orthodoxy goes, you got to remember the
Well,
first couple
I'm
centuries
sorry,
of
William.
Christianity.
William, you know, Seth and I were both Christians, right?
Well, of course, I know everything about you guys.
You do? How big's my dick?
Of course. All right, it's pretty good. Is what that's
Thanks.
the rumor.
All right. Now that we got the joke out of the way, what I'm saying, William, is I don't need another non-Christian to call in and explain what is Orthodox or heresy within Christianity. I need Christians to do that.
No, I wouldn't have called it if Christians would call in. Obviously, you're so intimidated by your fundamentalism and your knowledge of Scripture that they feel a little intimidated.
Well, I don't know that that's obvious at all, but didn't we just talk? William, do you want to defend your beliefs? Because I definitely don't need you to explain to me what Orthodox means.
I think there's some things in Scripture, the New Testament, that do go back to Jesus' own words, like short, pithy statements. They call them aphorisms, where Jesus says, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, given unto God." Well, that's believable. The parables. It's only when you get to John where you get, "I am the vine, you're the branch," these long, drawn-out discourses. Well, they probably don't go back to Jesus. And we were discussing...
William, hang on. Are you saying that you have accepted in your mind, you believe there was definitely a literal Jesus, God-man Jesus? Or
yeah, of course, yeah.
was Jesus God or was Jesus just some dude? I'm trying to figure out where your Jesus is on the scale here.
William and I had this conversation on Wednesday because William, I believe I called you out for Notice Me Senpai co-host syndrome doing book reports. William has this fascination with letting us know what he's read and what he thinks about Christianity, a religion that he doesn't accept. I'm trying to figure out what it is that you believe, William.
Well, I'm open. I mean, I went to, they're called life groups now, Sunday schools, out. I go to a hip church here in Garland, Texas. And we were talking about the Johannine coma, where these three testify, the blood, the water, and the spirit. And it's only mention
Here we go,
of
book report. I asked you what you believe. I don't need you to tell me about the Johannine coma and how that was inserted. I already know that. I'm trying to figure out what you believe.
I believe there's evidence that Christianity is true. When
Okay,
Jesus was
what is the
crucified...
evidence? What evidence can you present that Christianity is true?
Okay, Jesus died. Their hero, the guy that was going to rule the 12 tribes of Israel, the new kingdom. That, remember, the sons of thunder are going, their mom goes, "Hey, who's going to sit up on your right or left?" And Jesus say, "Hey, the big guy." I said, "That's not my call." But they were really sincere followers of this remarkable leader, and then he dies an ignominious death on a cross. I mean, it couldn't get any worse.
You're not providing evidence. You're telling a story.
He always tells a story. William has never contributed anything substantive in any conversation we've ever had. But I don't have any other callers at the moment, and William knows it, so he's got me over a fucking barrel. The question I asked William is, what evidence do you have that Christianity is true? Maybe I should start by having you say, what about Christianity do you think is true? Do you think there's a God?
Well, I was just about to say that.
I need you to get to it. Okay, we're going to do this really simply. William, do you think there's a God?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, you say of course. Was Jesus God?
He was an apocalyptic figure who thought the world was coming to an end.
I'm sorry, was Jesus God?
Maybe. Maybe he is co-equal to the Father.
Okay.
If Christian or whatever.
Does Christianity require there to be a Christ? Yes or no?
Of course, yeah.
Who was the Christ?
Well, obviously, Jesus of Nazareth, who
No, not
was,
obviously. I'm asking for evidence. And when you say dumb shit like obviously, you're not providing evidence. You're pretending that it's already just a fact that he was the Christ. If he didn't actually fulfill any messianic prophecy, how could he be the Christ?
oh, one of them that he didn't have any control over was where he would be buried. And Isaiah says he'd be buried in a rich man's tomb. Obviously, Joseph
No,
of Arimathea.
actually, and you have no evidence that Jesus was buried in anyone's tomb.
We have evidence that Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man, which it says in Isaiah, was buried Jesus.
No, you don't.
Mean, it's not.
No, you don't. Where is this evidence?
It's in the text. It's all it is a witness.
No.
Late
The
witness,
text is the
obviously 20 years.
claim. The text is the claim, William. The Bible says something. I'm looking for evidence that what the Bible says is true. When I ask you, do you have evidence that Christianity is true? You don't just get to point to the claim in the Bible. You have to provide the supporting evidence for it. Do you have any?
No. I mean, it's just
No. Then why are you?
text.
Then if you don't have evidence, William, why did you say you did? And why would you believe something if you don't have evidence?
Well, I misspoke. Let's say I have claims. Is that
No,
good
claims are fucking useless to me. You are the one that's going to come closest to breaking my Zen. I guarantee you.
Well, we have criteria. We went over two of those, multiple attestation, but I didn't mention the criteria of dissimilarity. If it sounds like Jesus says it, fine. If it sounds like the church, the early church is saying it, then it doesn't go back to Jesus. For example, Jesus is in the Gospels. Those who take.
William.
Go ahead.
I have actual theist callers who might be of use to talk to. Goodbye. All right. They're lining up now. I don't need William to co-host and book report, especially if the book is just the Bible. Alex is a theist from Vermont who says God exists. Hey, Alex, how are you? You're on with Seth and Matt. How can we know that God exists? Are you there? Alex, can you hear me?
Apparently, the rapture happened, and Alex was the
Let
only
me put
one.
Alex back in the queue. We'll maybe get back. That's so weird. All right. Let's try this. Ethan's calling from Washington. Ethan's a theist who's a previous caller and made use of recovering from religion. Hey, Ethan, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you. How are you?
Annoyed at the previous caller who just won't leave me alone and desperately wants to come give book reports and tell me things that we already know while not providing any evidence. I think you can do better.
Well, unless you take the Bible as evidence, I don't think I can do a whole lot better, but I can try.
You can be a better caller.
I did call to talk about.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear, Ethan. I'm not suggesting you're going to have better evidence. I'm saying you can probably be a better caller, but you were calling in to update on contacting recovering from religion and other stuff, I guess. So what's going on?
Oh, yeah, I did contact them. I think it was about 3 or 4 months ago. It's been helpful. I mean, probably the bigger thing, like I left my church. I think I told you I was part of like a fundamentalist denomination, like Calvinist. And it's been up and down, but it's definitely better. Recovering from religion, I don't know if you've used it. It's like a messaging, like it's a Slack. So it's kind of, it's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's one of the things you get into it what you give into it. So
hang on. Are you deconstructing out of Christianity and you're not a Christian, or you are a Christian and the Bible is your evidence?
I think I'm on my way out. I called in a couple of times like before to like not debate, but just talk about the resurrection. That was kind of like the one thing I was holding on to. I don't really have a like
Point.
it's more like habit, I guess, or superstition or guilt.
So
maybe.
what's the purpose of the call? Why do you want to chat with us today?
Because I feel like, I mean, I'd like to say it's academic, but I guess my beliefs are more superstitious. And the more I talk about it, the more clear it becomes.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can help.
I don't feel like recovering from a religion is a place to kind of debate that type of stuff.
Well, they're not
No,
an
they're not there to
organization
debate.
that's wired for debate. They're really more listeners and a support group. They're not really necessarily a deconstruction first group. Okay.
Hello? Is there some weird tech stuff going on?
I don't know. We lose somebody? Oh, Ethan's there. Ethan apparently just had a mild stroke. Ethan, what is it that we can do for you today?
Well, I guess, okay, so, like, how do you know the Bible's not true, I guess? Like, is there, do you have a confidence that it's not true, or is there ever something inside that says, like, what if, like, at the end of your life, gee, I should have maybe had that faith or something like that?
So, it's kind of weird to say, how do you know the Bible isn't true when there are things in the Bible that we know aren't true, and there are other things in the Bible that we have no idea if they're true or not. So it's not like the Bible's just one thing. But no, I don't sit around ever thinking, ooh, what if it's true? I wonder, but I'm not worried because the burden of proof is on the claim that it is true. And considering that we've been sitting here for thousands of years waiting, when we know things in it that aren't like, for example, I'm not the person to dig in on this, but I mean, if you go listen to like Justin or Dalton, they'll happily explain how Jesus, even if he existed, didn't fulfill any prophecies for the Messiah. But the Bible is wrong within the first 6 verses, which we know from science, that the earth didn't exist before the sun. And so the notion that there is some God and that he has something to save us from and to, and that we need to do something or consider something, it makes absolutely no sense that I could sit here and wonder if an ancient book has wisdom in it from a God that exists supposedly now, cares about me now, would like to have a relationship with me now, but is suspiciously silent and ignores every plea for interaction and provides no evidence. If I was God and I wanted a relationship with people, first of all, there's no way I'd be condemning people for other people's sins or inherited sin. There's no way I'd be wanting blood sacrifice or having substitution or atonement or loving I love the smell of barbecue, but not for the redemption of sins. And there's no way that any of that makes any sort of sense. And yet it makes perfect sense as a fear-mongering tool to keep people in line and get churches money.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. I guess when you say I mean, yeah, when you put it like that, it makes sense.
Can you give me an example of what you would
And I
call
guess
a good teaching in the Bible that you couldn't get somewhere else?
and that's yeah. Well, I mean, you know the same ones that I know. Treat your neighbor like yourself. Forgiveness. I do think that it's taught me to put people first, put other people first, to treat people with the respect and the dignity that you want. I know you can find those from other religions.
And
I do
other
lean,
cultures outside of religion. What I'm saying is the Bible ain't all, it's not original. I mean, don't be an asshole and try to live an honorable life. I don't think are all that novel anyway. And they exist and have existed long before Christianity, all around Christianity. So there are people who are like, well, I'm a cultural believer because I like a lot of the teachings in the Bible. And my question has to be, well, can't you find incarnations of pro-social instruction or advice that exist without all the superstitious baggage?
yeah. No, I know, and I mean, I think someone said once before something about wanting to believe and perhaps that's it. Like, I don't know, it just feels
Well, why do you want to
terrifying.
believe?
I
Maybe
mean, it's
that's the
only been a couple
question.
of months since I've left, and I guess
Why? What
go
is
ahead.
it? What's the attraction? Why are you sort of feel that a magnetic draw backward? What is that about for you?
I think, like I said, there's it feels like guilt or fear, superstition maybe.
That's
Um,
fair. No, no, no. That's totally fair, and that's where I was hoping you were going to go. Religion, fundy cultures bake in a punitive measure if you disagree or leave. And those can be in the here and now, they can be relational, they can be financial, they can be physical, and they can be spiritual in their brain, right? Eternal. And so for those of us who were indoctrinated into a fundy faith that has a sort of a paradise and pain model for the believer and the unbeliever, in order to keep from being questioned and challenged, they frighten us and they control us. And they say, what if you're wrong? You don't want to get to the end of your life. And if you die, you were wrong. Uh-oh, what are the consequences going to be? Maybe, if nothing else, you should hedge your bets and at least live on the periphery of our religion. And I think to understand those methods of control and to understand the superstition, the mythology, and the weaponization of it by high control cultures is important, because I think we have to overcome that fear if we're going to be true seekers of what is real. And so that may be the next step for you. Understand, do some homework on what health theology is, what what this sort of high control punitive model is, understanding how it's been used to harm people, and then deciding for yourself as a force of will, no matter how you feel about it, but just deciding, I will not be controlled by that. I'm going to pursue the evidence wherever it leads, regardless of what they say. There's a liberation in that.
It'd be weird to be punished. Like, if you think about it, under various religious models, not just Christianity, there's a God who made us, gave us a brain, put us in a world where Seth should do that instead of me, but put us in a world where we use that brain to reason. And reasoning is a tool that we develop and understand that is the most consistently reliable path to seemingly accurately understanding reality, and then makes his own existence seemingly impervious to reason, relying on fallacies and suspicions and faith and all of these things that have no demonstrated reliability when compared to reason. I think it would be insulting. Frankly, I think it's one of the biggest evidences that there is no such being. Because if you were God and you understood the value of reasoning and evidence and the risk of fallacies and faith and fraudulent thinking, and people were running around saying that's the path to you, I would feel an obligation to step in and correct it and say, no, 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 no. You don't have to rely on hearsay and fallacies and a book and this. I'm right here. You don't have to follow me, but I'm here. Don't stop representing me or stop misrepresenting me.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I mean, and I guess the fear is, I mean, originally it was, losing family and friends, and that's definitely been difficult, but I guess I don't know, I guess maybe I'm just looking, not necessarily an answer, but once I stop looking or something like that, I'll feel defeated. I don't want to, I don't know, but there's nothing else that I can really believe in. So I guess that's the new term.
Okay, this gets back to Seth's question. What do you mean there's nothing else for you to believe in? Seth and I believe in all kinds of things. I'm a secular humanist. I'm a skeptic. I believe in science. I believe in, if you want to get into more kind of, amorphous things, I believe in freedom, individual liberty, autonomy. I believe in justice. I believe in love. What is it that you think you're going to be missing or you're not going to have? What is it you need to believe? What do you think Seth and I are missing?
What I think Seth and you are missing? Well, I guess I'd want to say the resurrection, but I mean, if I can't prove that, then why would I say that that's what you're missing? And I
don't even know what that means.
The resurrection. I mean, the Bible talks about the resurrection, a new earth, a new heavens and a new earth are being.
Oh, you think Seth and I are missing the hope of an eternal life?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm also missing the hope of being a billionaire, which is, by the way, immoral. But is it good to have hope of an eternal life if there's actually no eternal life to be had?
No.
You know what Seth and I are missing? Delusions and lies in that particular category. Don't get me wrong. We're both deluded and have accepted lies in plenty of other categories over the course of our lives. But if you have no good reason to believe there's an eternal life and you're clinging to it just in case, then A, you're not actually a believer. And B, the only thing you have that we don't is this seemingly obviously false belief. Because from what we already understand about the brain and psychology, there is no soul. There is no consciousness absent a physical brain. And the malleability of every characteristic you could attribute to a soul, except for being able to exist outside of the body, is an identifiable, testable function of a brain. If there's nothing of me that survives this, I have zero hope of an afterlife. If there's an afterlife, I'm going to be incredibly surprised. And if there's a judgment in that afterlife, I'm going to stand there and say, I'm me. I was honest. I was intellectually honest. You failed to provide evidence. You get to judge me. You can punish me. You can reward me, whatever. Maybe there's a God that just rewards you being intellectually honest and not believing in shit when you don't have a good reason.
No, I don't think that seems likely.
Really?
Yeah, no.
How is it any less likely that there's a God that rewards sound thinking over a God that rewards gullibility? How is that less likely?
How is it less likely? Well, again, it'd be going to the Bible as saying that we're made in God's image, and if
you cannot keep
logic,
drawing from that well. You cannot keep quoting to us the Bible.
All right.
All right. The Bible is not going to get you
Oh, well.
anywhere with us. The Bible is not evidence. The Bible is a book of claims and stories. It's ink on paper. It is not the foundation on which you want to build an argument, man.
But it's also embarrassing
All right.
when I suggest, how is it less likely that there's a God that's not the biblical God? And your answer was, yeah, but the Bible says. I mean, do you not? So,
Well, I did. I don't think I heard that part. So maybe it's. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you just jacking with
Maybe
us?
it's a little bit less embarrassing.
it's really difficult to take you seriously at this point, because I specifically said,
Yeah.
how is it less likely that there's a God, not a biblical God, a God that rewards in an afterlife sound thinking more than it is likely that there's the biblical God that wants to reward gullibility? And you're like, well, the Bible says. Well, congratulations. Here's another question for you. According to the Bible, God is good, right?
Yes.
And Satan is evil, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Why, sure.
Okay.
Right? The Bible
What
calls him the
criteria?
one who has come to steal, kill, and destroy. He's evil. We can agree on that if you're going to rest in the Bible, right?
Well, there's a lot of different views on. I mean, if there's even a devil. I mean, there's the character in Job.
Ethan,
Probably like
stop.
the first real devil.
Ethan, stop. There's a lot of different views on whether there's a God. Let's not pretend.
I was just then trying to answer the.
Okay. I give up, because this is approaching levels of dishonesty and stupidity that I don't really care to engage with. The question was going to be, does the Bible say that God essentially wrote his moral code on your heart, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean that God is actually good? Because if the devil wrote his moral code on your heart, wouldn't you think the devil was good?
I don't know how to answer that.
That's because you're not willing to be honest.
Ethan, you
Okay.
know what a swirling eddy is? You're in one. I am not convinced by the temperature of this call that you are interested in swimming out and into another direction. I think there's something about you that just likes going in the circle. I don't hear anything proactive in your approach, in your questions, in your comments, in your challenges that is anything other than just going around and around 360 over and over. I don't know what that does for you, but it is not how we pursue truth. And I'm
fair.
convinced
All right.
that unless you do become more proactive and you make a pointed decision to swim out of that eddy, all of the calls that you make to shows like this are going to be the exact same thing. Doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve the show. Okay?
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess that's another riff on what is true Christianity. And he's deconstructing, but he's not. And there's the Bible, but it's not. And then was there this or was there that? And I just find myself thinking, dear God, if you'll pardon the expression. Frustrating.
Seth believes. It's an old question. I mean, these are pretty straightforward. If the criteria you're using to determine if something is good is your heart, and God wrote his moral code on your heart, then you're going to judge God to be good. Doesn't matter if he drowns the entire world in a flood. Doesn't matter if he kills the firstborn. Doesn't matter if he has David's wives raped as a punishment to David. I mean, all of these are horrific things that the Bible God does, and yet that God is supposedly good. Well, if you judge God as good no matter what he does, cool. But that would be true even if Satan wrote his moral code on your heart. Hell, if I wrote my moral code on your heart, we're still speaking, metaphorically. I'm not going to take an ink pen and scratch into your heart. But if I did that, I would be the perfect being. And I will say, I'm already better than the God of the Bible by a long shot, because I'm not going to advocate for slavery, misogyny, sexual assault as permanent punishment for infinite punishment for finite crimes, extended punishment where you inherit the sins of your father to the fourth and sixth or fourth and 10th generation, etc. Yeah, I'm way better than the God of the Bible, and so is virtually every person I've ever met in my life.
Do you find utility in some of those? Usually they come out in meme form, but the argument in a deeper form does exist. I don't use it because I'm nervous that it might be poor reasoning, but they will calculate how many people God killed in the Bible and then how many people Satan killed.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, who's the more wicked? Is that an effective angle?
Probably not. It might ought to be. I mean, I don't buy into the doing math with souls and people and body counts and stuff like that as a measure of good. Like, oh, I killed a family of 4. Like Elon Musk is nearly a trillionaire again, or maybe who knows. If he donated $800 billion, does that mean that he's a good person if he goes out and kills a family of 4? I mean, doesn't matter what he donated to. Could be the best secular humanist supported charities out there, could have saved countless lives. He could have supported, like Norman Borlaug levels of rescuing people from starvation by creating dwarf wheat. And yet I think killing a family of 4 probably overwrites that. I don't even view the notion that you could sum up the entirety of somebody's character as good or bad as a real thing. Like, all of us are capable of doing good things and bad things. The notion that, oh, this is a good, this is bad. And it only works in this playground fictional sense when we're talking about special mystical beings. But if you tell me that God is good, all good, and I read the verses where he has David's wives, already a strange thing to pluralize, sexually assaulted as a punishment to David, that being is not good. It's not a good, there is no moral sense that says that that's a good thing. David did something wrong, and so as a punishment, we're going to have his wives sexually assaulted. It's weird. But once you buy into this notion that God is the good one, no amount of killing or grape or anything else is going to be a disqualifier.
Well, a riff
Once
on
you are
that
part
too
of
is
the
divine
cult.
morality, right? We are ants in his ant farm. You know what? That's one of the angles that freaking Ark Encounter apologist took was, if we are his creation, can he not pretty much do what he wants, right? And I think I responded like, well, if I father a child, let's say I have a son, am I then allowed to beat my son, torture my children because I essentially created the child? But they give God sort of a special pass. And he said something else that relates to what you were talking about. He asked me, he said this, I'm paraphrasing. You have done something in your life that is so wicked and you're so ashamed of it that if anyone ever knew about it, it would ruin you. And we've all got that. We've all got something in our life where if that secret was to ever get out, that awful thing that we have done, it would ruin us and it would reveal what a wretch we are. And I remember listening to that and I thought, he is saying, and I'm not saying there are not people who are defined by their worst mistake. Right? I don't let the murderer off the hook, right? I don't let Jeffrey Dahmer off the hook, those types of things. But this idea that we are not all flawed humans who've screwed up and have hit the wall and done dumb shit and destructive shit and had to hopefully course correct and make it right and move on. But this idea, this sort of self-flagellation, I am defined by the worst of me, is another reason why I protest and speak out against biblical Christianity. Because unworthiness is baked into the doctrine. The whole idea of baptism by immersion is that I have to die to me and I have to be raised up in Christ because me deserves to die. I need to be wiped out. My identity has to be in many ways replaced with the identity of Jesus. And that's an attack on the self. I think it's really offensive to frame it in that way. And the idea to many of these people that to say we have value on our own and that our lives have value and all that is selfish and egotistical and we just want to be God, I find insulting. So anyway, you triggered that little memory in my mind from last weekend. Not that the guy is still under my skin, but it just so presumptuous it irritated me. So
it's one of the things. So first of all, there's the whole, like I grew up in back before Bill Cosby was a known rapist, with him doing that comedy bit of, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. And that mentality was around and it was common and it was kind of a half joke. But what that pastor said, I can tell you right now that while I've done things that were stupid and I've done things that I'm not proud of, and I've done things that I would definitely never do again and would regret, I've never done anything that would ruin me if somebody found out. And that's especially true after I watched the Epstein class get away with absolutely the worst things ever. Oh, we were going to go to Alex, but Alex dropped. That's probably pretty good. Alex has a history of anti-trans stuff. All right. Patrick is calling from Illinois. Patrick's pronouns are he, him, says the Christian God is the best description for morality and epistemic normativity. Hey, Patrick, you're on with Matt and Seth. How are you?
Hey, I think my original thing was description, but explanation. Thanks for having me on the show. So would we agree that universally humans ought to believe what is true and ought not believe what is false? I saw your talk with allegedly Ian,
wow,
so I know you're somewhat of a moral realist.
I give up, Seth. I got a single syllable out before I was interrupted. So,
well, you saw
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify with allegedly Ian. That's all. I'm sorry.
You're throwing in a little context. You saw a talk that Matt gave.
Yeah, with allegedly Ian, and I saw that he was leaning towards moral realism. Matt, I did not mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify and give context for everybody if you wanted to fill in where you're at with moral realism.
I'm getting ready to do a new video, and it's not necessarily moral realism. It's an objective foundation that goes beyond what I used to have before. But no, I don't necessarily think that we ought to believe that which is true. I do agree that that is a preference, and I don't know how to justify that as an ought.
Great.
Help me understand real fast, both of you. Is the word ought thrown out as kind of a tripwire?
It's an imperative, yes.
It's an imperative. Yeah, like we ought, for example, so we would be doing what we ought not do if we say, I don't want to believe that truth. I want to believe a comforting lie, so I'm going to go back to my cult, or I'm going to blast my brains out with drugs, or any number of things. Like if we, like for example, if you say I got deconstructed or I got deconverted out of my religion because the evidence brought me out of that, then what that means is there is a prescription from truth itself that dictates the actions of people, what they ought to do and how they ought to think. That truth itself is prescriptive, absent of anybody's preferences.
Is it prescriptive or can it be descriptive?
Well, if it's descriptive, then it doesn't have an actual prescription. For example, I could say that humans have X behavior that is, communal, but that's just a description of their behavior. That doesn't necessarily prescribe anything any more than 2 + 2 = 4, or like what the atomic number for lead is.
I'm sorry. I interjected briefly. Go ahead.
Are you saying Matt or me?
I figured Matt was going, but
what are you calling about?
Yeah. So if we ought to believe that, if the answer is no to the question, ought we believe what is true and ought we reject that which is false, then truth and falsity in terms of what people believe are of equal value, and there's no tiebreaker between true or false belief. There's just preferences. And therefore, deconversion, what it does is it moral maps on the reality around us and uses it to draw away from one conclusion necessarily and draw towards another conclusion necessarily.
The fact that you can't justify believing true things and not believing false things as an actual imperative doesn't mean they're of equal value. We can demonstrate that accurate beliefs have more value, both to the survival of the individual. Not in all cases. There are cases where false beliefs might be beneficial, but that doesn't mean that they're of equal value. However, okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so then we're making a value claim about survival and well-being, right? So that would be the tiebreaker between any considerations.
Well, no, I'm saying that is a potential tiebreaker between those. People might have personal preferences. That doesn't mean that their personal preferences have anything to do with well-being. I'm trying to figure out. So you're calling in to say the Christian God is the best description for morality. Did the Christian God have David's wives raped?
Yeah. And here's the difference.
And that was a good thing. And that was a good thing.
That in terms of judgment, on the primary level, God cannot categorically be blameworthy because there's no authority above him. You just can't engineer that. So
we were just talking about this. We were just talking about divine command theory and vertical morality.
I'm sorry.
I reject divine command theory. I reject divine command theory.
I'm sorry, Patrick. You're saying that it was a good thing to have David's wives raped.
There's an equivocation going on here between primary and secondary.
No, there's no equivocation going on. Can God do anything that is not good? 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 You're not going to get to say another word till you answer that question. Can God do anything that is not good?
You're not going to let me parse because you know that I can make it make sense without you.
No, I'm going to mute you. I'm not going to let you lie. If you answer this question, liar, you can then go on to try to make yourself look good. But the reality is, you've already said that God had David's wives raped. In the story, David sinned, and as a punishment to David, God had David's wives raped. And I asked you if that's a good thing. And your parsing is, well, there's no way to judge God. There's no authority above God. No. Can God do anything that is not good? Does God only do good? You won't answer that question with a yes or no, which would allow you to continue, because the fact of the matter is, you know that the Bible represents God as, well, actually the Bible represents God as potentially good and evil on different occasions. But is it a good thing? This is the question. I'm even going to type it in above my head, because you're not going to bust my zen with your lies. Was it good to have David's wives raped? There we go. I'm going to put this above my head. This is the question. Was it good? Here's the question for Patrick. Patrick, I'm bringing you back now. There'll be a beep, but you didn't miss anything. So, was it good to have David's wives raped?
It's a malformed question. You won't accept it. You know the primary and secondary causation, and you will not let me clarify that. So here's the primary and secondary causation.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know how many times I have to explain this to you, dishonest, lying Christians. Just answer this question, and then I will give you the space to try to rehabilitate yourself. You won't answer it because you fundamentally know that everyone who ever watches this is going to have a reaction to rape and to using rape as a punishment. Rape as a punishment would be wrong even if the person who was being raped was the one who did wrong and was being punished. That would still be immoral. It's especially immoral and wrong if it's done to punish someone else. It reinforces the idea that his wives are his property, and I will punish you by doing harm and damage to your property. So I'm going to give you one more chance to answer this question. If you don't answer this question, I'm going to change the question. So, was it good to have David's wives raped?
It's a malformed question without primary.
Okay. Since you're not going to answer that question, we're going to come up with a different question. We'll see if this one isn't malformed. Doo-doo-doo. How you doing, Seth?
I'm just trying to figure out how you can even approach the idea of rape with an equivocation or a pause, how it cannot be immediately condemned.
Well, it's weird that you actually said that, because the question that I was typing, which I'm now going to put over my head, which we're going to bring Patrick in to try and dodge again, is this. Patrick, under what circumstances should someone be raped as punishment? That's the next question.
In terms of those who can do the raping, obviously nobody should rape anybody, but that's the secondary causation clarification that you won't allow to come out.
I'm sorry. I just allowed you to say that. I asked you, under what circumstances? You did not answer my question. So here we go. Try this again, Patrick. Under what circumstances should rape be used as a punishment?
By whom?
Anyone.
I'm sorry.
This is not
Matt,
going well for
here's
you,
the deal.
Patrick. Indulge me for a second, Matt. Hang on. I know.
Hold on.
No.
I know you
Seth
don't want
wants to say something, and then I'm going to say something. You're not going to say shit until I say otherwise, Patrick.
The morbid curiosity in me would like to hear him, would like to give him just enough rope to hang himself and let him go for about 25 seconds. Would that be okay? Because I'm insanely curious as to what comes next.
Yeah, no. Here's the thing. I'm going to unmute you now, Patrick. I know I'm away for the beep, and I'm going to say this. So in answer to your question, when I said under what circumstances should rape be used as a punishment, you said for whom? By God.
Here's what
against someone. Under what circumstances should God use rape as a punishment?
Because he is truth, he can use whatever secondary means he wants to, including the death of anybody in any circumstance. God has decreed from the beginning to the end how things would go, and yet the free will choices of his creatures are still the free will choices of his creatures, regardless, because they did exactly what they wanted to do. Again,
could God have punished David?
Revelation 13.
Could God have punished? I'm sorry. I let you give your answer. Could God have punished David without having his wives raped?
Entirely possible. God could have not had that happen. Yes.
That means that God could have opted for a different punishment, but God specifically opted to have David's wives raped. Correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't know when I was on the air or not. Am I back yet?
Yeah. So God could have used a different punishment, but he opted to use the punishment of having David's wives raped. Is that correct?
Yeah, he could have used no punishment. He could have had David killed.
I'm sorry. When I ask a yes or no question, I only need the yes because I'm building to the next thing. I'm sorry you don't understand how this works, but we'll get there. So
I said yes.
I'm sorry. I don't know why you're even speaking. It's my turn right now. It's matter of fact, it's almost always my turn. But here we go.
I know.
If God could have, yes, I know. Would you shut up so I don't have to mute you again and let me finish? Thanks. If God could have used a different punishment, but God opted to use this punishment, then I'm assuming you are fine with God using that punishment. You don't have any objection. You don't have any moral objection, right?
This is a conflation all the way down from the beginning to the end.
This is really simple. This is really simple, Patrick.
No, it's simple to you if you're not able to parse it. Yeah.
Patrick, okay. I'm not going to let you bust my Zen. You're not fucking worth it. I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to type the question again because you're a little, floundering. You've already basically acknowledged this.
Can I tack one on while you're, I mean, you don't have to type it, but why would any punishment be meted out to someone other than David. Wait, he's punishing David. Why was somebody else punished?
It'll be the
by
same. It'll be
proxy?
the same answer because God gets to do whatever he wants.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, Patrick, I've unmuted you. Do you have a moral objection to God using rape as punishment?
Oh, no, because God is the truth and he can do whatever he wants, not humans.
Yeah. Patrick.
It's not an equivalent.
You act like I wasn't aware that that's what you were trying to say the whole time. I don't know why you wouldn't just give the answer. And the answer is that Patrick has no objection.
Lazy question.
I'm sorry. I don't know why you're fucking opening your fucking mouth. Shut your pie hole. The fact of the matter is Patrick has just acknowledged that he has no moral objection to God using rape as punishment, even though God had other options. And he believes this because he thinks God is true. And so, for clarity, Patrick, does that mean that God has no moral judgment upon his actions because he is morality?
God is morality, sure. But that does not entail that we get...
No, that was it. You don't get to do a but and continue. I'm going to bat you around like a little fucking chew toy, and I'm going to make $1 million off of your clip, because Patrick is basically saying he knows that the God of the Bible, who we have no reason to think exists, Patrick has not made any demonstration that God is truth. Patrick has not made any demonstration that God is moral or what morality is. But Patrick is completely convinced that because in his view, God can do no wrong, which is the question he should have answered earlier. Can God only do good? Yes, because God, by definition, is truth. God, by definition, is morality, which means there is no moral assessment on our part that we can attribute to God. That's what Patrick's view is. Patrick is a mindless robotic slave who thinks he's a plaything of God. And so was David, and so was David's wives. And Patrick is fine with God using rape as punishment, and using rape as punishment when it's not even directed at the person he's trying to punish. Patrick called in to explain that the Christian God is the best description of morality, and to object to the moral systems that the rest of us would advocate for. And in doing so, he has made an embarrassing show of his own view on morality, that he is unwilling and unable to actually use his mind and his heart and his empathy and his compassion to understand that nobody, no being, no agent, even a God, could be viewed as morally correct in raping someone as a punishment, especially for something somebody else did. But Patrick wants to spin. And because Seth asked, and because I'm amused, and because I've already got the clip I got out of Patrick, I'm going to unmute you in a second, and you're going to get to do your best for 60 seconds. I'm starting a timer. I'm going to give you a full 60 seconds to do your best to explain to everybody who's going to watch this clip exactly why it's okay for God to have people raped. 60 seconds starts now.
So as you can see, we ought to follow that which is true, and we ought to deny that which is false, because truth is prescriptive. It's from the beginning to the end. This has been an entire performative contradiction. If you want to talk about primary and secondary causations, you can look at Revelation 13:8, where Christ himself was slayed from the foundation of the world. Thereby, by definition, every atrocity, everything was deemed to happen by God, including the flood, including war, including slaughter, including rape, all those sorts of things. And to say that that makes him a bad God is to beg the question of by what standard, which every atheist has to do from the very beginning. They have to value map all of these things, which they can't actually attribute to, because they can't find a tiebreaker between any dilemma or any comparison of any good or the contrary of any good in any sense whatsoever. So all of these objections, which don't parse between secondary and primary causation, also have a problem of saying, well, I didn't do it. The Big Bang did it. I didn't do it. Physics did it. I didn't do it. Evolution did it. They can just kick the can down the road and make nonsense out of primary and secondary causation. Now, if you look this up, God deems what's going to happen but he uses the free will choices of his creatures in order to ordain those things. And we have the same problem with atheism, because if we believe we're accountable, like I'm accountable for my words and actions, then therefore I can't blame evolution, because even though I'm just a product of matter and motion, I still have responsibility somehow. I still have justice. I still have actual guilt. None of this makes sense.
Okay. I gave you actually a
I
minute.
was counting the non sequiturs, but real fast, Matt, I'm sorry. Free will. He just throws free will in there. And it's it's like we had a whole different conversation for about 4 seconds. Like, well, we're not talking about free will, right? I mean, that's a different conversation, is it not?
Yes. I gave you an
sorry.
extra. I gave you an
just
extra
wanted to
30
jump in.
seconds.
Sorry.
I gave you an extra 30 seconds because I already knew where you're going. I've done this for 20 fucking years, and it's embarrassing. Patrick's problem is that he doesn't see any possible solution to where do we get an absolute objective moral standard from, and thinks that makes truth and false equal. That makes there's no tiebreaker for these things, which is ridiculously stupid, as I demonstrated at the beginning of the call. But even if there was no solution, even if moral realism isn't true, I'd rather have situational ethics that are based on empathy and freedom and good senses of justice that are wise, than to give up all moral sense to a storybook that you cannot demonstrate as true, that would force me to embarrassingly make excuses for rape the way you just did. I am morally superior to you. I am morally superior to the God of your book. I am morally superior to pretty much everything that you said. And I'm not even that good. I'm just pretty good. And you're shit. Bye.
I did find it in a twisted way impressive. The sort of the vomitus apologeticus, was he reading? He literally, I don't think he drew breath for 80 seconds. It's like, holy shnikes, where did all that come from? I'm going to come back to free will. I hate this position, right? This idea that is our free will choice that has caused us to become rapeable. It makes me crazy. And free will is weaponized in a lot of ways. It's also used to ostensibly excuse why God doesn't exactly prove himself beyond question to the world. And we ask, well, why is 2/3 of the planet worship a different God or none at all? Why is the God who's not the author of confusion so confusing? What the hell is going on? Why can't people even agree on what Bible translation to preach from and all the things we discussed earlier? And they say free will. And I think that's just crazy. My free will choice is not at all impacted by how clear God is. I think the more clear God would be, the better a free will choice could be made. I would make a better decision of my own volition with better information. So a super clear God, with no question, I'd be able to say, oh, well, now I have the information I need to make an even more informed decision. And then beyond that, wait a minute, because I have a free will choice, now I'm really the ant that God can put under the magnifying glass and roast and Delise Crispy. I can be murdered. I can have my children murdered. I can be genocided. I could be raped. I could be tortured forever in hell because free will. I found there was a weird disconnect. They're cousins, I guess, but I thought that little bounce out was an odd twist for me. It was an odd turn to take in that particular diatribe.
Yeah, it's especially dumb. So first of all, the type of free will that most versions of Christianity might rely on, this sort of notion of libertarian free will, is one that I fully reject. I don't think that kind of free will exists or could exist, but I also don't think it's particularly relevant. And the truth is, neither does Patrick. Patrick brought up free will and primary and secondary, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. But the reality is, Patrick also said that from before time, God willed all of it: the flood, the destruction, rape, death. All of it was willed by God. Under Patrick's model, there is no free will. God willed everything. And that means if God is morality, there can be no assessment of the moral character of God because he does what he will with his creation. Then there is no morality in Patrick's view, which is why Patrick is an absolutely pathetic representative of the best versions of religious morality that at least begin with some sort of compassion or caring. Patrick's view is God planned all this out. You don't get to judge him. And if he's decided that somebody's wives are going to be sexually assaulted as a punishment for their disobedience, their husband's disobedience, then that's just the way it is. And there's no moral evaluation for that. And you atheists don't have any way to address this at all. Actually, yes, I do, Patrick. And the video that I'm going to be releasing, Ian and I already did a talk about my switch to something that's closer to objective moral standards. I think that there are objectively necessary truths of what must be valued in order to have any moral foundation. I'm going to do a video on that, but it's just an extension. Before I would say, hey, look, I'm with Sam and others who have basically describe morality as well-being, and if you don't think morality is well-being, I'm still talking about well-being, whether that's what you mean or not. And under that foundation, there's no universal, imperative. There's no ought requiring you to care about well-being. But if you do, there are then objective assessments you can make. What my new position does is provide an objective reason to care about well-being in some regard, because you must have the autonomy and freedom to even hold a moral view and attempt to impose it. And so that is essentially, you must care about well-being, or you don't have any moral system. There's no, even a bad moral system, one that's like, oh, I think I'm the only person who gets to do what they want and everybody else should die. And I think we should destroy the universe. If that is your moral system, you can't even have that system unless you have the autonomy and the well-being to have that view and attempt to impose it. And so that's where I'm getting in that video. But Patrick's in that they think, Patrick and others have come to the very hard realization that they cannot demonstrate the truth of their beliefs. They cannot demonstrate that there is a God. They cannot demonstrate that he is truth. They cannot demonstrate that he is moral. They cannot demonstrate that the Bible stories are real. And there are so many problems with the Bible story, beginning right at the beginning in Genesis, where it gets the order of events wrong. And then you come across, slavery, and the genocide and incest park thing that you went to last week. And this notion of, using wives as property for punishment in the most disgusting way possible. He's surrendered to that. He's so stuck because he has a belief that he cannot justify. And so instead, he wants to run around saying, well, you atheists have nothing. You atheists can't justify this. You guys can't justify it. At least I can justify it. No, you can't, Patrick. You can pretend that you've justified it. And in your process of pretending that you've offered a justification for morality, you have demonstrated to everyone that you do not understand even the basics of human decency, of empathy, of autonomy, of justice, of all the things that almost any sensible person would attribute to some version of morality. You are, if not actually a psychopathic in your assessment of morality. And I'm thrilled that you called in. And I'm thrilled that I gave you the 90 seconds to expose that, because now I don't have to make a case for why I'm morally superior to you or your God. Everybody can see that plainly. It's embarrassingly bad. By the way, for the people struggling with Christianity, I was reminded of a verse, and I talked about it the other night. when I was on with Dalton. And Dalton, I think, is probably somebody who appreciates this more than a lot of other people, because Dalton went from essentially Christianity to Judaism. And for our previous caller that was struggling with Christianity and, you know, losing the notion of eternal life, you'd be better off going with Old Testament stuff, because the Old Testament is in many ways superior and just generally wiser than some of the New Testament stuff. And so the passage I'm specifically referencing is Micah 6:8, which I referenced on Wednesday night's show. But it says, the Lord has told you what goodness is. This is what he wants from you. Be fair to other people, love kindness and loyalty, and humbly obey your God. While I don't have any interest in obeying a God, I'm fine with the rest of that. And if that's what the God of the Old Testament defines as goodness, then I would say advocating for, whether it happened before time began or not, using sexual assault as a punishment is inconsistent with that definition of goodness. And the only way around that, which Patrick has used, is to say God's above the law. God is above goodness. God cannot be good. He defines goodness and does not have to be good. It's sad. Speaking of Micah, Micah's our next caller. Micah's calling in from Kentucky. Pronouns are he, him.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Micah, how are you? You're on with Seth and Matt.
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
I'm all right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, cool. I think there's a little bit of a delay.
There is.
So I've been seeing a lot of your debates here recently on YouTube Live, and I used to watch a lot of your debates probably right whenever I got into college 10 years ago or 5 years ago, something like that. So I'm kind of a big fan. I wouldn't say I agree with everything, of course, but so my question for you.
Someday you will.
My first one was and also I should probably say that I'm not exactly a theist, but I used to be Catholic. But anyway, so
What do you mean you're not exactly a theist? Are you convinced there's a God?
I think it's complex, but I would say that at least
No, it's not.
yes, I believe
You're
in God.
either convinced there's a God or you're not convinced. That's the only option.
Well, I guess it also I'm kind of more of a Jordan Peterson type, if that makes any sense. He'll say things
So
like,
you're infected with black
What
mold
do
and
you-
you say bizarre shit?
I'm sorry?
Well, Jordan Peterson's lost his mind in part because he was infected with black mold, but Jordan Peterson doesn't have any sort of sensible understanding of or thoughts on theism, as we demonstrated when the two of us sat down and discussed it. He avoids answering the question, but avoiding answering the question doesn't mean that it's complicated. The fact of the matter is, for every proposition, you are either convinced that the proposition is likely true or you are not convinced. Those are the only two options. And so for the proposition, some God exists, you are either convinced that that proposition is likely true or you are not convinced.
Yeah, that definitely follows. I guess where I'm pushing back is that it just depends on what sort of God we're talking about. Like, if you're going to ask me,
No,
do I
it
literally
doesn't.
believe?
Wow, this is so weird, Micah. Is there any God that you are convinced exists?
Yes.
Cool. Then the answer to the question when I said, are you convinced that a God exists, was yes.
Okay.
What God exists?
Well, I don't really believe in in the Christian God per se. Like I was.
I don't need you to list the
know
ones
if
you don't believe in. We'll be here forever. What God exists?
I mean, I think that something created the universe. We can start there.
Okay. Why do you think that something that counts as a God created the universe? What evidence do you have?
Well, the fact that we do exist, I think is proof enough that there is something that created us.
No, it's
Like
not.
the fact that there.
The
Okay,
fact that
well,
something
why
exists
is it
does
not?
not tell you why it exists.
I'm just saying that. I mean, if it's true that everything has a beginning, then the universe must have a beginning, right? So something made us.
No, it's not necessarily true that everything must have a beginning, and it's not necessarily true that the universe had a beginning. And even if the universe had a beginning, that doesn't in any way tell you what that beginning was or if it should qualify as a god. I mean, you are just
Okay.
stacking one confusion on top of another all the way down. What evidence do you
Yeah,
have that there's a
I might be.
creator
I'm
God?
not going to say that I'm not a
But
Christian apologist or nothing. I'm just a
what
truck driver. You know, I'm not.
I don't need it.
I'm sorry.
Wow. Okay. Seth, I apologize. I've talked a lot, and I really don't need to hear all the things he's not and doesn't believe in. I just need answers to the questions, and that's what evidence does anybody have that there's a creator God? I don't know why this is so hard.
I mean, something
Okay.
happened is all I heard. I mean, that's not an
Yeah, me
argument
too.
for God. It was, oh, great, something happened. Thank you for that. Thanks for the call. What else you got?
I mean, I was just trying to have a good conversation, man. I know y'all were going to be some dicks about it.
Oh, look, all right, fine.
We're
All
dicks
right,
because
hang on, hold on. I'll give you a little oxygen here. You think something happened and that there was a cause that kicked us all into motion, and you have decided that that is a god, an agent with godlike powers. Am I close?
Yeah, pretty much.
By what criteria did you make that conclusion?
To be honest with you, I'm just not sure, which is why I'm calling, because I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know what I'm supposed to believe. You know, I grew up in a Catholic church, and I don't really believe in what they teach, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You know, I need help trying to figure these things out, which is
Well,
why
I
I
mean,
called. I hope that
I
you
don't
guys
like
could
the
help
word
me.
supposed to do this or that. But I mean, you started by making a claim, and now you just told me that the claim doesn't make a lot of sense, and you're deconstructing out of a specific faith, and you're not sure. And so I'm trying to figure out what is the purpose of the call? Are you calling to demonstrate, to try to make the case that there was a God? Or are you telling me that you have a lot of doubts and questions and you're on the way out of a God belief?
Yeah, I would say the second. I have a lot of doubts. I mean, I really just don't think that I believe in the Christian God, but I do believe. I'm sorry.
Something
Maybe I
happened.
wasn't as prepared for this call as I should have been.
Well, I appreciate you admitting that. Now, I'm not going to punish you for that here at this moment because I don't sense bad faith in you, at least not yet. But something happened is a little bit of a riff on, wow, we all came from somewhere and they assign an agency to the beginning of all things, and, at least in our cosmos, right? Well, if there was
Hmm.
something, we'll call it someone powerful enough to spin it all into existence, that must be an intelligence. That intelligence must have godlike powers. But these are all assumptions. They're all claims. They're guesses, and often they're bad guesses. Can you see why they're
Okay.
problematic? You don't know how the universe
Yeah,
began, neither
I
do
definitely do.
I. But to say,
I agree
well,
with
it's a creator God, that's a leap that we're making. It's not tethered to evidence. Is that fair?
that is fair. I guess honestly, I don't want to get too bogged down on the whole like where did we come from thing, because I'm more interested in morality. That's the main thing that kind of freaks me out whenever I think that, if God's not real, then what is morality? Like, what is right and wrong, and what's
Oh,
actually
dude,
stopping people from?
this is not nearly as hard as people make it out to be. And the religious weaponize it because they're inferring that we are not moral, or we're hijacking or shoplifting a moral code from their pet god. Pick a religion. But this idea that we survived and thrived with pro-social behaviors is not hard. When we treat each other better, when we coalesce, when we have community, when we are good, then good returns unto us. We are more apt to procure resources. We're more apt to survive and thrive when we decrease suffering and increase flourishing. This is what we would call ethical behavior. If I go over and I beat you up, you understand that I've done harm to you. You feel pain, you got broken bones, you're bleeding, right? You understand the concept of harm. Without any God, I could be of any religion or no religion, whatever. You know that I've harmed you. So you have an understanding of what immoral or non-ethical, harmful behavior is. You don't want that for yourself. And you also understand the consequences if you were to inflict that on someone else. So evolutionarily, with some anomalies, evolutionarily, we understand that decreasing that type of behavior, avoiding that type of destructive behavior, and instead coalescing is better for everybody. You're safer, I'm safer. You're happier, I'm happier. You have more, I have more, right? That's not hard to understand, is it?
No, I don't think that is hard to understand, especially when you frame it like that. But also, I wonder about edge cases. So, for example, if we're voting on abortion or they talk about gay marriage and stuff like that, what if there's an edge case similar to those? And I'm not like saying that I have an opinion on those, or I'm not voicing my opinion on those two things. But like, if there's a lot of disagreement about those edge cases, then what do we do then? You know what I'm saying? Because I would think that at least from a less religious standpoint, you would have to go with what's practical, what's best for society. But it seems to me that a lot of people don't agree on what.
Wait a minute. So we see non-heterosexuality throughout not just the human animal, but we see it throughout the animal kingdom in general. Roughly, 5 to 7% of creatures non-hetero, they exhibit all kinds of variations on sexual behavior. That's not a moral question. That's just a fact. And we see there are some who say, well, one of the arguments against homosexuality is that you cannot procreate. You can therefore not pass down your genes. But as Forrest Valkai and Erica and others have pointed out, individuals do not evolve, populations evolve. So we are still seeing pro-social communal relationships, whether they're homosexual, hetero, or whatever, as part of a larger model of community to help the population pass on its genes. So, I mean, homosexuality in that instance is not a moral question. We're simply talking about a fact of nature. Abortion is a complex issue. But if you looked at Roe v. Wade, it actually increased the limitations on abortions based on the length of or the period in which you were inside the pregnancy. And as has often been pointed out, the pregnancies that are terminated later on in the pregnancy are unwanted, because anyone getting that far along obviously wanted the child and they were heartbroken that they weren't able to become a parent. And the rights of the mother are in many ways paramount. They're messy and complex situations, but I don't understand why this is difficult to understand. To decrease the suffering, increase the flourishing. No God's required.
I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. And again, I apologize if you guys are normally having more educated people on here. I don't really know what I'm talking about. It was just a random whim, but I do appreciate you guys talking to me.
I appreciate you being honest about it. I'm not, we're all ignorant about stuff. Hell, I'm not Yoda.
Yeah.
I have a lot of these conversations, but the truth is that I'm still learning as I go. Hell, I learned about Billy Graham, something I didn't know about on this podcast. I'm always asking people stuff. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, are any gods really required for the shit that we do? For good, bad, or indifferent? And time and again, the answer is no. All we see is the natural world in which we live. We only have each other. We're doing the best we can. Go out and be good to someone for goodness sake, okay?
Hey, can I actually ask you one more question?
Okay.
And then maybe next time I'll have some more questions lined up. Who knows? But what is the best counter argument that you've ever heard, like pro God or pro theism?
I
Like,
don't know
is
that
there
I've
anything that's
ever
ever
heard
made
a
you
great
question
one.
your stance?
I'm not aware of any arguments for God that aren't either fallacious or untestable. Uh, and no, I'm not used to people who are more knowledgeable or educated than you. I'm sorry that you think it's a dick move to ask you to defend your position or to correct logical fallacies. Figured if you were here to learn, then figuring out, hey, no, that's a fallacious line of reasoning. That's false. That's not true. That's not none of that. That might be useful. But if it gets me labeled a dick, I'm actually okay with that, but I'm sorry I did.
It must have been me. I don't know. I'm not
No.
too pressed about it. There was one time I heard a guy, I forget his name, Jay something. I think he's a Christian apologist, but he said that there was his strongest argument for it, for God's existence was the argument of transcendence or something like that. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard all of them. It's been my job for 20 some odd years. So there are transcendental arguments for the existence of God that basically argue that
transcendental.
Yes, I'm aware. The transcendental arguments for God fit into a number of different categories, essentially presupposing the existence of God as either a grounding for logic or morality or the foundations of reality. Yeah.
And you just think that it's bullshit, basically.
The arguments are not demonstrably sound. I don't know that there's any justification for thinking that there is or need be a founding for logic, or that a being could be that. Truth, as far as I can tell, is just basic, self-evident. Something's either true or not. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
even if
been...
we needed. So, for example, we're stuck. We can't demonstrate that reason is always reliable, but we presume that it is. And we're limited because we don't have any other tool to measure it by. If you were to try to prove, for example, that identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, those foundations of logic, if you were to try to prove that those weren't always reliable, you would have to assume they were true in order to try to prove them false. Like, what's your objection? Not you personally, but I mean, what would the objection be to, ooh, that's a contradiction? Okay, who says a contradiction is wrong? I mean, you have to start with something. So I'm fine with presupposing identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle, but theists aren't. They want to know why identity is what it is. And so they presuppose a being that they can't demonstrate as real and say that this being is the guarantor. It's the one that makes sure that a thing is what it is, rather than just accepting that a thing is what it is.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it. I'm definitely gonna think about a lot of this stuff, and hopefully I'll write down some questions and get you guys on another call. How frequently do you do these live debates? Is it an everyday thing for you?
Well, this Sunday show is on every Sunday in the afternoon. There's another Sunday show that starts here in about 3 or 4 hours. And then I do a show on Wednesday night. There's a bunch of shows. Monday, there's Skeptalk, which deals a little bit more with science and stuff like that, but they take religion calls there as well. Tuesday night is Chewed Gum, which deals a lot more with purity culture and how religion's views on sex and sexuality and women's issues impact folks. Thursday's Transatlantic Call-In Show, right here on the same network, where you can call in and talk to real live trans people about trans rights and get educated there. But then there's also, Cus I Wanna's and Calling It Now's and a whole bunch of different shows. Just subscribe to the line and ring the bell to get notifications, and you'll find out we're live. But all of us also do things on our own channels. Like I go live on my channel. Seth goes live on his channel. Most of the co-hosts here, Justin, Dalton, Ian, all those guys are doing debates and call-ins all the time.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Y'all have a good rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks, Micah.
As I was thinking, he said, what's the best argument? And I was kind of like, well, So, but I went through a laundry list. I did a speech years and years ago where I actually did like a greatest / worst hits. Let me just rattle a couple of these off. My granddaddy wasn't a monkey. Evolution is just a theory. The God of the gaps. It takes more faith to be an atheist. Teach the controversy. You were never a true Christian to begin with. You took it out of context. I had a personal experience. Pascal's wager, better safe than sorry. How did something come from nothing? The complexity of the eye. Scientist X believes in God. The Bible tells me so. All religions deserve respect. We are a Christian nation. They found Noah's Ark. There are no atheists in foxholes. If it's not true, why has it been around for so many thousands of years? Ignore the Old Testament, read the New Testament. Where do your morals come from? You just want to be a god. It's not a religion. It's a relationship. Darwin had a deathbed conversion, near-death experiences. There are no transitional fossils. Prove God doesn't exist. Why are you stealing my joy? And for someone who doesn't believe in God, you sure talk about God an awful lot. And those are just the ones I was thinking of when I put that little list together. One of my favorites is that condescension where the believer looks at you and goes, you know what? You may not believe in God, but he believes in you.
Or someday you will.
Someday when you stand before God,
Every knee shall
throne of
bow and
judgment, you will know. So,
well, here we go. This is potentially a different call, but so Rainwood's calling from New York, pronouns are he, him. Rainwood says he's found things in the world that are eternal without using the Bible and thinks that's evidence that a God exists. So, hey, Rainwood, you're on with Matt and Seth. How are you?
Hey, Matt. How you been? Hey, Seth. Don't want you to lose your zen.
Oh, I'm good.
Hello?
So
Okay.
What is eternal that you have found, and why would the existence of an eternal thing prove that a God exists?
So, yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to run by you guys just to get your perspective on it. So, there's, you're going to laugh a little bit. There's certain things in the ocean that actually live forever, which is like there's a species of jellyfish that never die unless they're, of course, killed. Yeah.
No. So
you can
that's not eternal. Did those things exist before the earth existed?
No.
Then it's not eternal. What else you got?
But okay, well, you don't. Right now, scientists says they never die.
I don't care. What have you got that's eternal?
Okay, the sky.
The sky? What makes you think the sky is eternal? That didn't exist before the earth either.
And after the sun goes supernova, it won't exist for us in that capacity again either.
Wouldn't the universe be eternal?
Well, we don't know if the universe is eternal or not.
Well, if hypothetically there's a wall that says the end, there has to be something on the other side of the wall. No, Matt?
What?
What are you talking about that's a wall? So, for example, imagine the room you're sitting in. Imagine you've been in that room for your entire life and you've never been outside and there's no doors and windows. The four things that surround you that you're calling walls, how do you know they don't go on, or six things actually, considering the floor and the ceiling? How do you know they don't go on forever? There might not be anything on the other side of them.
Well, we can knock down the wall, right, and keep going.
Can we? So what wall are you talking about that there must be something on the other side of it, and how do you show it's a wall?
I'm just making a hypothetical that...
I don't need hypotheticals. You said, it says here that you found things in the world that are eternal without using the Bible, and you think it's evidence that God exists. We're still trying to get you to demonstrate one eternal thing, and then after you do that, you'll have to show how that shows that a God exists.
I apologize. I thought that the jellyfish would wind up being one thing for sure, because science now says that they don't die. So I thought that would be one thing.
That's not eternal.
Well,
Even if they
maybe not
didn't die, even if they didn't die, that would be one direction of infinite, but not eternal. But if the sun goes supernova, those jellyfish are going to die.
Okay.
What
You
does
might be
a
right.
what does
Let's
a
imagine.
regenerative creature in the ocean have to do with a larger argument? What point are you trying to make?
Yeah, I don't
Well,
have a
the point
tardigrades.
that what I'm trying to the point I'm trying to make, Seth, is that if there is a creator, there would be remnants of perfection around us. We would be able to see things like
How does
children
that
born with
follow?
children born with photographic memories. Where does that come from?
So first of all, your assertion that if there's a creator, there would be remnants of that perfection is 100% flawed, because the creator doesn't need to be perfect, and the existence of a perfect creator doesn't mean that anything else is perfect or that there would be remnants of perfection. The same is true for eternal. So let's imagine that we found something in the universe that is actually eternal. How could that possibly demonstrate that a God exists?
Well, I'm going to go. Maybe I didn't hear your answer well enough, so I'll run it by you again. The universe itself, as far as we know, as far as science can show us right now, there seems to be no end to it. It seems to be expanding.
No, that's not true.
That's what I've
Science
heard.
has no way, science currently has no way to explore the universe prior to essentially the Planck time from the beginning of the expansion. We have no way of knowing what state it was prior to that, whether it was past eternal or not. And if time, as we understand it, in a broader sense, began with the universe, then it's true that there is no time at which the universe didn't exist. But it's not eternal with regard to the space it occupies. We know how big it is. But even let's just say that the universe is in fact eternal. How would that prove that there's a God?
Well, because you would need something outside of time, space, and matter to create time, space, and matter, right?
No, you wouldn't. The universe is eternal.
Okay. I'll concede.
That means the universe has always existed and will always exist. How does that prove there's a God?
I'm going to have to do a little more research on that, to be honest with you. I didn't want to call in without something to say, so I looked at a couple of things that I think is, I believe everything's inherited, right? So when I look at a child with photographic memory, where did that come from? That seems to me
okay,
like
so first of all, people with eidetic memories, or what we're likely to call eidetic memories, are you suggesting when you say it's inherited that their parents also had that?
No, what I'm suggesting is that it's in the bloodline somewhere along the line. For instance, if I can just make a quick example, you have a couple of snakes, and then out of nowhere, those snakes throw back a snake from 4 generations back, and you say, "Hey, where did this come from?" But being that you raised the snakes, you keep good records, and you would know that's a throwback of why this one is black or black and white or whatever. So
yeah, you should probably not go down this route. This is not how genetics works. And as somebody who breeds snakes, I'm not going to breed 2 snakes and get a throwback to something that we didn't know about 4 generations back, except if we're talking about a genetically recessive trait that hadn't been bred and we had just missed the odds. But that doesn't mean that somewhere in the past there was someone else with an eidetic memory. Not every feature of human capacity, human skill and ability, is a simple genetically inherited trait.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it were, why would the existence of a child with an eidetic memory prove a God?
Well, where I was going with that is that if people were once perfect, at one point, we were perfect, if we were originally with no sin, no death inside of us,
Rainwood,
no imperfections.
Rainwood, are you a Christian?
I am.
Does the Bible say that people were ever perfect?
I believe our first two parents were perfect.
No, that's not what the Bible says. Only God is perfect. When God finished his creation, what did he pronounce it? Did he say it's perfect?
He said it's good.
It's good. Is good perfect?
No.
So we also know that the Adam and Eve story is not true. So if your goal is to try to go back and say, ooh, look, Adam and Eve must have had an eidetic memory. Adam and Eve didn't exist. Adam and Eve didn't exist. We know that.
How can we know that for sure?
Because we understand the origins of the diversity of life, not the original life. We don't necessarily have a solution to abiogenesis, but because we can trace our ancestry back. And so what scientists might refer to as mitochondrial Eve is the most recent living female ancestor of all humans. That does not mean that that is Eve from the Bible, because that wouldn't line up with what would be the genetic Adam either. However, the Bible begins with a story claiming that the earth is older than the sun, which is false, and that Eve was made from the rib of Adam, which is false. And there's no reason to think they were perfect or had an eidetic memory. And eidetic memory isn't what you seem to think it is. It's not perfection or an echo of perfection. It's just a really good memory.
Well, yeah, I heard about a particular woman who actually recalls every day of her life, and it's really incredible, But you give me some things to think about, and I appreciate that. I always looking for things to try to expand my horizons and try to make sense out of certain things, Well,
you can look into. I don't know which woman you were hearing about, but you can look up Mary Lou Henner, who was on Taxi as Elaine. And while I don't think she has an eidetic memory for everything, she has a virtually eidetic memory for a number of things.
All right. I find it fascinating.
It is fascinating. But what
I tried to,
the thing is,
I tried to draw
you seem
perfection.
You seem like you're beginning with this notion that there is a God, and you found that you don't have any good reason to think there's a God. So you're desperately out there looking for some echo of God in reality. And the things that you're looking for wouldn't even necessarily be an echo of a God anyway. Why should we believe there's a God at all?
Well, I thought about that. I thought you might ask me that question, and I was thinking about my response, truthfully. And what I was thinking of asking you is that if we woke up tomorrow morning and we saw no death, no sickness, no starvation, it would truly be a paradise. It's not. It's not. I mean,
no.
You would view it. Wouldn't it be a paradise?
I have a serious answer and a joke answer, and then I want to get Seth in here because So the serious answer is that if we woke up, why are we coming up with these hypothetical scenarios? If we woke up tomorrow and there was no death, that would be something worth investigating what the potential cause was. But I don't call it paradise, because if there's no death, that means that every fascist piece of crap that is trying to label me a traitor and destroy the country that I live in and destroy the world that I live in, that means they're still alive, and that's not paradise for me.
I got you on that one. Understood. But I think right now, I also did a little investigation. Doctors, and this became very surprising to me, doctors don't actually have the key for why we grow old, get sick, and die. They don't have
It's
that.
called entropy.
Yeah, I know. That's what they call it. But the thing is that I looked at the jellyfish that I mentioned earlier, and I saw, how can this lowly species
Lowly
re-replicate
how?
itself?
Why wouldn't you consider that species superior? I mean, wouldn't it look at you and think you're lowly because you're so fragile and you're going to die?
Well, if evolution is correct, it's the true evolution that we're all related to oak trees and pine trees and all life is connected. We shouldn't be surprised that jellyfish is living forever.
Well,
we're related
first of all,
to the jellyfish.
Evolution is a fact, an observable fact. The models for evolution by means of natural selection, genetic inheritance, things like that, those are scientific models. However, you're using a criteria to say that the jellyfish is a lower species or a lower creature. Evolution doesn't have any view of one creature being lower than another. Evolution just is. We are apes just like all of the other apes, and we are just as evolved as all the rest of them. That doesn't mean that we've had the exact same number of changes. It means we are all at the same point in time. And so cheetahs are faster than me. There are animals that are less subject to the effects of entropy, like that jellyfish. There are animals that are stronger than me. There are animals that are able to digest food that would kill me. Like I can't go to Taco Bell even if they're not selling the lettuce that's infected. And yet my dog can eat pretty much, well, almost anything. She did get diarrhea the other day. But this notion that you can look at one category of animals and say this is a lesser category of animals, I don't know what the justification is for that.
Well, if we just take evolution on its face, I mean, do you believe that you're related indirectly with a butterfly?
I am indirectly related or directly related to every other living thing on the planet, as far as I can tell.
So you would believe that you're related to an oak tree. I'm not trying to sound funny or sarcastic.
No, it's not funny. I am, in fact, related to an oak tree. Yes.
Yeah, I just, until they can show me that I believe in microevolution all day long, but macroevolution where they can't show me.
There's no distinction.
I'm not even talking about the missing link. Because when I was
no, there's no distinction. Macroevolution is just microevolution over a longer period of time. Little changes add up. That's all it is.
No, Matt, I get that. I get that,
You don't get that. Or you wouldn't be trying to make this distinction.
I get that a fox, a wolf, and a coyote and a dog. Look, in the last 100 years, we've created 350 different types of dogs in 100 years.
How many could you create in 4.5 billion years?
What's that?
How diverse would life be in, let's say, 1 billion years?
Very diverse.
Yeah. Maybe diverse enough to both include an oak tree and a human as things that share a common ancestor.
Yeah, but my point, and I mean this with all due respect, if I gave that point for the existence of God, you would say there's not enough evidence, right? But yet atheists.
That's correct, because please make the same point that I just made about how changes in living things can add up over time to where it is plausible. And I would say that we have mountains of evidence. I just don't have the knowledge and the time to go into it with you, that in fact oak trees and human beings are related. How does that tie to an argument for God that you think I would dismiss? What evidence do you have for God? Because I have mountains of
Well,
evidence for evolution.
if, if there's a God and he wanted us to be happy, okay, he would create diversity of animals so that people could go horseback riding.
No,
have
no, Rainwood, no, Rainwood, no, Rainwood. You're just making shit up.
No, I'm not.
If there is a, yes, you are. You are, and I'm going to explain how. You said if there is a God and he wants us to be happy, he would do this. That's simply not the case. First of all, we're trying to figure out if there is a God, why would he create anything in the first place? And there is no justification for saying this God wants us to be happy, or that in order for us to be happy, he would create diversity that includes an oak tree. By the way, under your model, the people who will be saved will spend eternity in heaven without that diversity. So what you've done is you've looked at the world and you've said, I think if I were God and wanted people to be happy, I would go with diversity because diversity makes me happy. You have put your own assessment into the character of a God and then tried to argue that's the case. But even under that model, the fact that your God model is consistent with observations does not mean that your God model exists. Because if we find a dead body, it's consistent with that dead body that the butler did it or the gardener did it. We're trying to figure out which one did it, and it might be neither. You don't just get to say, I think God would do this, and this happened, therefore it's God. That is logically fallacious, start to finish. Everything from your assumption of what God would do to you putting the cart before the horse.
Well, my response to, I listened to everything you just said, Matt, and you make a lot of sense. You really do. But I disagree on the fact that when you look outside, and this is not something with the trees argument, it's something that we all take for granted, including myself as a Christian. I take it for granted. You look at if there was just one species of trees, pick out any species of trees, and you still would have the symbiotic relationship of the tree giving off oxygen and taking in carbon dioxide. It would still work. And let's make believe all you had was apples to eat. You can live on apples. You can live, but we have a diversity. It shows, in my mind, and I'm not being fallacious. In my mind, I see God, everything.
Yeah. So, yes, if there was only, it would actually be more miraculous and more consistent with God if the only type of tree on earth was an apple tree. Diversity isn't something that would be required for anything tied to a God, but it's exactly what happens under genetics, where things change over time. We have bananas that we can eat because we specifically, intentionally bred bananas away from what wild bananas were. But sometimes that also happens without our input. We have Chihuahuas and Great Danes along with wolves, but also there are varieties of canines that didn't occur through human breeding. The fact that there's diversity speaks to the power and unbridled, unchecked dispersion of life evolving. It does not in any way demonstrate that just because you think God wanted us to have diversity, the diversity proves God. That's like saying, I think God wanted me to have this show, and the fact that I have this show means that there's a God. That's the fallacy.
Well, I see your analogy, but if you just was to, even for 1 week, strip yourself mentally of everything that you enjoy on a daily basis. I don't mean your wife. Of course, your wife is your wife, but strip yourself of eating one type of food. Just look at one type of tree. Get rid of your dog. Get rid of your snakes. We take for granted the diversity of life. I'm passionate about this because I see.
I can tell you're passionate. but it doesn't in any way demonstrate that there's a God. And I don't need to give up stuff for a week to recognize that I appreciate diversity. I already acknowledge I appreciate diversity. But the fact that I appreciate diversity, just like the fact that I appreciate this show, doesn't mean that there's a God that wanted me to have diversity. And it doesn't mean there's a God that wanted me to have this show. My analogy is apt. You are desperate to avoid it, but you're locked in. You are making shit up about what you think God would want because you have an appreciation for diversity. What about people who don't appreciate diversity? What about people who are allergic to peanuts, for example? Why would God put peanuts down here to potentially fucking kill them?
That goes back to the imperfection. You know, that
What
as a
imperfection?
Christian,
What imperfection? And from the Garden of Eden that never happened? You're going to go with a fairy book story instead of science?
Well, Matt, I know that we disagree on the Bible.
It's not a matter of disagree. I'm right and you're wrong.
As far as the Bible goes, I'll just say
I don't
this.
care how the Bible goes.
Well, I look at, for instance,
which came first, Rainwood, the earth or the sun?
I know what you're saying.
No, you don't, because
I don't-
well, all right, you probably do since you're avoiding answering it, and that's what all dishonest interlocutors do. When I ask them the question that would expose the problem with their thinking, is they say they do the, oh, I know what you're getting at. Which came first, the earth or the sun?
The sun,
Which one does the Bible say came first?
the earth.
So the Bible is wrong then, right?
Right.
There we go.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you believe the Titanic went down?
Yes.
I know Seth is laughing, but you know we all can.
I'm not
agree the
connecting
Titanic-
that dot. Forgive me, Rainwood. I'm sorry. I'll continue to wait here in the wings. Go ahead.
Yes, I believe the Titanic sank.
Let me pepper it together so you can understand, Seth. Okay? So we all believe the Titanic went down. There was a book written about it. There was a movie. But there's different...
We've sent submarines down to explore it.
Yeah. And they still don't know if there was musicians playing on the deck when it went down. There's all kinds of different stories that people make up because they're human beings. In the Bible,
so why didn't you ask me if I believed that there were musicians playing on the deck of the Titanic instead of I believe the Titanic went down because I have overwhelming evidence that the Titanic went down, including footage of it and direct testimony from survivors, and the fact that we have, footage of the thing existing, and then all that. Why didn't you say, do I believe that musicians played on the deck of the Titanic as it was sinking? Because if that's just a story, like I don't have direct evidence for that. I have testimonial evidence, but I would have still said, yes, I do, because I don't find that particularly remarkable. And I'm willing to accept the testimony of the people who say that's what they observed. That doesn't change anything about my understanding about reality. It's consistent with what I understand of human beings. What is your point? Before Seth's head explodes.
The point is that certain people gave testimony that the Titanic broke in half, and others say it was too strong to break in half and went down in one piece. Now, that's a major, if we were talking about Christianity, you would say, well, that's it, stop, it's over, there was no God, there was no Jesus. It's 2026 right now because it's just 2026. There was no Jesus that came. We just throw it all out. There's no Titanic, throw it all out.
I'm sorry. You don't understand the burden of proof. You don't understand the nature of evidence, and you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm not. So I can actually look at information about the Titanic. I have physical evidence. We can explore it. We can listen to witnesses, and we can put together a compelling story of what most probably happened that is consistent with the facts of reality. Is there anything about any of the stories about the Titanic that you think violate the laws of nature?
No.
No. Is there anything about the creation of the universe and life that you think violate the laws of nature?
Let me just think on that.
The answer is yes. God is
No,
supernatural. So, okay, so life's just natural. No God required. Cool.
I'm a little stumped.
I know. It's
I,
okay. Go think about it. We got other callers.
okay, thank you.
Have a good day. The Titanic, it's just like creation.
And you were talking about snakes. I flashed back to that old Stephen Wright joke where he talked about getting fired from the pet store because they had 3 snakes, and one day he braided them and tried to sell one snake with 3 heads. I don't know why. It just popped into my mind.
Oh, it's funny. All right. Here we go. Seth, say hello to Sean. Sean, say hello to Seth. Sean's a theist who's here to talk about why either God must exist or why God is good.
Hello. Hi, Seth.
Hey,
Which of those do you want to talk about?
you start. Make your case.
Okay. Okay. I guess why God must exist.
Hang on. Hold on. Can you define God for me? Is there a specific God with a proper name?
No. So I would say I could re-say it by saying super intelligence that created everything must exist.
We'll start there.
Okay. So I think the reason why we know that super intelligence must exist is because there's no other means to explain what we see. One of the
How do you
things
know that?
is, well, we don't have a means to explain what we see that makes sense outside of the existence of that super intelligence having created it. So, for example, the machines that are the bodies of the animals that you've talked about quite a bit, it does not make sense to say that random changes to the instructions on how to build them plus natural selection is sufficient to explain how they came to be. Like, that's
Okay, I'm going to
just
stop you.
nonsensical.
I'm going to
Okay,
stop you for just a moment. I think,
sure.
approaching it from the wrong end of the looking glass, right? You are seeing us as an end product, which was intended, right? We were built, we were designed, we were intended, which is not what we see in nature. We are a result, but we weren't an intended result. There wasn't an original master plan. Secondly, to say that there must be a super intelligent designer, first creator, God, or whatever, I think, that's an assertion, but we don't know where everything came from. And the third point I want to make is that if you're going to claim intelligence, you're going to have to somehow explain all of the overwhelmingly unintelligent design, whether it's problems in our genetic code or blind creatures with eyes or an earth that's constantly trying to kill us, a sun that gives us cancer, problems, with even our own reproductive systems, the trauma to bodies, infant child mortality. I just think time and again, if you want to talk about intelligence, how about some of the stuff that was supposedly designed that makes no sense in terms of design?
Okay, well, if we want to start with that point,
Sure.
I think it's just a supposition that just because of those things that you mentioned, that all of these what are perceived to be imperfections or much more than that, just like bad design, as you might say, for example, in all of the medical problems that we suffer and some of the animals suffer as well. And I totally understand that, but that is just a presupposition that means it's not intended, right? No, I'm suggesting that is part of the intention.
So I was intentionally designed to have degenerating eyesight, and I require scientifically developed prescription lenses for vision correction. I was purposefully designed to have arthritic knees. The sun was purposefully designed to emit harmful UV radiation, which would be responsible for melanoma. That's intentional?
Yes.
What
because
would what
the
would the
fundamental
purpose
thing that I
be
think
for
is
that type of intention? Why do you think
sure.
a super intelligent designer would design that kind of destruction into the source code?
That's a good question.
It
And one of the
is
most,
a good
and I'm
question.
going to answer it. I'm going to
Okay.
answer it, sir. The answer is that all, in my belief, right, is that all knowledge is a contrast, including the knowledge of good and evil. So the
Hang on.
only means by which, okay,
I'm not interested as much in what you believe. I'd like you to
no, this is a
demonstrate
fact.
what you
This is a
know.
fact. No, what I just said is a fact. All knowledge is a contrast. That's a fact.
I don't
The knowledge
understand the
of good and
claim.
evil.
Explain
Okay, but I
all
have you to
knowledge
let
as
me
a
explain it.
contrast to me.
Okay, like, so for example, if you know something, the only reason why you know it is because you know its contrast. So like, you know the color yellow because you know the color blue, but you wouldn't know the color yellow if you were surrounded by only in a room of everything being yellow, right? If you were born in a room that was yellow, you would literally not know that you were in that it was a room that was filled with the color yellow because you never
I
saw any other
disagree with your
colors.
premise. I disagree. But are you saying that I would only know evil because I knew good, and I would only know good because I know evil? In that way, I would know a
That's correct.
contrast?
That's correct.
Ah,
That's
That's
correct.
demonstrably
Yes.
false. If I was in a room with nothing but yellow, I would still, I wouldn't, it wouldn't necessarily have the yellow name, but I would know from direct experience that I experienced this particular color, no matter what its name is, or its reference,
No, you
or its
wouldn't. You wouldn't.
relative, or its, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you
Never
wouldn't
mind.
have any
I'll
means of
stop.
knowing.
I'll stop. I'll stop. You go ahead and
Go ahead.
teach us, a wise one.
No, sir. No. Like if you had something more to say, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I want to know what any of this has to do with the designer, like a super intelligent designer. Are you saying that if the source code is aberrant in a way, or produces um, destructive results, are you then saying the super intelligent is not necessarily an omnibenevolent God?
No, I'm saying it's part of the plan that is not over with yet, right? So the fact that we all, die ultimately, which is the result of the bodies not being created to be, sufficiently capable of persisting without doing so, does not mean that that's, something that a bad God would do or that the God is necessarily bad, right? Because it's not the end of the story, right? The same
Okay.
means by which you were created in the first place could be happening again in the future, right? You could have a new body in the future that you just don't know about yet.
Well, help me understand how the idea of some sort of cyclical, perpetual existence would make reasonable infant mortality or child leukemia or tremendously destructive deformities that cause pain and suffering, natural disasters,
Right.
people being covered in lava,
Right.
tornadoes ripping people to
Yeah.
pieces. Someone explained to me how, okay, well,
Right.
there might be a 2.0 and a 3.0 existence afterward. So it makes 1.0 okay, even when it's not. Reason that out for
Okay.
me.
Okay. Yes, because the only means by which you can love and know and appreciate good is to hate evil, and we
No,
can't hate evil if we have no experience of it. Right?
this
You
is
can't
a
know
riff
good
on
without knowing evil.
what Norman Geisler, the apologist, made popular a few decades ago. He called it the crooked line and the straight line. The only reason we know what a straight line looks like is because we know what a crooked line is like. So another riff on this is that the designer would require suffering so that that designer could then contrast an ultimate good against it. Does any of this ring familiar to you?
No, but my point is that we're talking about facts here. It's not a question of if, it's a question of it's we know that good and evil are a contrast. The knowledge of good and evil is a contrast. So, for example, a more easy to understand example that's kind of front and foremost is like if you're honest and you appreciate being an honest person, the reason why is because at some point someone lied to you, right? You experienced that negative, bad thing, and you learn
Not
to hate that.
necessarily. No, that's not necessarily a foregone conclusion. I'm hearing a lot of premises that I disagree with. Here's the rub. You and I, if we had the power to create a world and populate that world, I have no doubt that we could put together a series of systems that would work, whether or not there was a perpetual existence, a 2 or 3.0, some posthumous thing, whatever. You and I could come up with a system that didn't involve child cancer. You and I would not need for people to be swallowed up in tsunamis, where 250,000 people drown horribly in a single event. You and I could come up with a plan that didn't require any of that. Don't you think?
We could, but then we would have failed, because
why would
all of
we
the
have
people
failed by
that-
reducing suffering and increasing flourishing in the initial plan?
Because people would not even know that they were not suffering. They would not appreciate the good. They could not feel good because they wouldn't appreciate good. They couldn't appreciate good because they wouldn't know good. They wouldn't know good because they didn't know evil. They never had an experience of evil. We never provided that for them.
All
That's
right,
why it's
hang on.
absolutely
I'm
necessary
going to
at
be a
some
little
point for
crass
that to
here
happen.
for just a moment, but I think it served my point. So I would not be able to properly understand or enjoy an orgasm because I didn't know what it was like to be castrated. Right? I have to know what it's like for someone to slice off my junk for me to know the ecstasy of orgasm. Is that what you're telling me? I wouldn't know what the pleasure is unless I also knew the pain, right?
That's an extreme example, but
It
true
is an
that,
extreme example, but it's a relevant example. Don't you think tsunamis are extreme examples? Are you shitting me? How is the
totally
drowning
agree.
of 230,000 people not also an extreme example that you're excusing?
I'm saying there is no other means to know good except to have some knowledge of evil as well, which can only be gained by experience, because all knowledge is gained by experience. So if we, as the gods of this theoretical world, created a world where it was good from the beginning, there was no evil at all, the people that were experiencing it would not know that they were experiencing good. They would have no appreciation for it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Child that is sure.
If the people in the world, by your model, have no way of knowing that they're experiencing good, but there is no evil, what's the difference? Why would anybody need to know they're experiencing good and not evil in a world where evil can't exist?
Because they can't feel good if they don't appreciate appreciate.
That's
good.
not true. They don't know that they're feeling good, but they aren't feeling evil, which already is good.
No, you can't feel good if you don't appreciate good, and you can't.
You
appreciate
absolutely
good if you don't
can
know
feel
evil.
good. You feel what you feel. You just may not know that it is called good or that there's something that contrasts with it. The same as with the yellow. I can definitely have an understanding of yellow, even if I don't know any other color. I just don't know that it's called yellow in this particular model. But if there's only yellow, you're wrong. You're factually, demonstrably wrong. But in the world where there's only yellow, why does it fucking matter if somebody doesn't know that it's not blue?
Because they wouldn't know that it was yellow. You can't know something without knowing its contrast. You cannot. That's not possible.
Oh my God.
Do you believe that deity has
no. It's not a fact. Here's the thing. In a world where there's no blue, your complaint is they can only experience yellow and they won't know it's yellow because they don't know it's not blue. But there's no blue to experience.
What yellow is because they don't have anything to contrast.
You don't need to know what yellow is. You don't need to know what yellow is if there's no blue. And by the way, blue and orange are the contrast, not yellow, but it's close enough.
Yeah, I just disagree.
Is there a...
Well, okay, you can disagree all day, but you're wrong. Because I feel however I feel. For example, I don't need to hit myself in the hand with a hammer. I don't even need to be able to experience hitting myself in the hand with a hammer to know that I feel my hand and it feels fine the way it is. I can, in fact, hit myself in the hand with a hammer. I can observe other people doing that. I can see and investigate that. And so there's a contrast there for me to assess why I prefer this one But if there's nothing for me to prefer it to, I still experience it as it is. I just don't have the appreciation for it because I'm not appreciating that it's not the other thing. But in a world where the
That's
other
right.
thing doesn't exist, no appreciation is required, which is why they can say there is no sadness in heaven.
If there was a world where that never existed, you never experienced the evils, then you would also not appreciate the good, like being an honest person.
You
for example,
can
any of the
repeat
virtues.
yourself. You can repeat yourself as many times as you want, but you are wrong. You are demonstrably, logically, factually incorrect. I feel however I feel, irrespective of whether I know what else it could be. Not all knowledge,
not true.
by the
That's
way,
not true.
is not merely the result of contrast. Knowledge is also just directly experiential. I know, for example, what it's like to have an orgasm. And not just because I know what it's like to not have an orgasm, because I could know what it's like to not have an orgasm and never be capable of having an orgasm. There are people who cannot feel pain. They have a condition that prevents them from feeling pain. Do you think they do not understand that they are not feeling pain?
I think that if they've never felt pain, they don't have an appreciation for not feeling pain.
Okay. What good is it to have an appreciation for not feeling something that you can't feel? Like, should I have an appreciation that I'm not a millionaire when I'm not a millionaire and there's no chance of me being a millionaire?
Well, I mean, you're saying having an appreciation for something that's not good. So, I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? You would appreciate being a millionaire, not appreciate not being a millionaire.
No. Look, if my wife comes over here and tells me she loves me, I feel a certain way. And you're saying the only reason I can feel that way is because I know what it's like to not have someone tell me they love me, right?
Yes. Yes.
So if nobody's ever told me that they love me, I have nothing to contrast that with. So I can't have knowledge that nobody loves me.
I suppose that's true. Yeah. I mean, it sounds
and
like
that means that I am in a state of not being loved, which I am aware of what state I'm in. I'm just not aware of what it's contrasted with. I don't need an appreciation for the state that I'm in by necessarily having a contrasting thing. I just know what state I'm in. So if you're only going to contrast good and evil for this purpose, if there's a world with no evil, is there evil in heaven?
I mean, I would argue there's not really such a thing. I mean, there's the kingdom of heaven that's inside you. It's not really a physical place you go after you die. It's what Christians believe. It's not what I believe. But if
you believe there's a God,
what I'm suggesting is
you believe there's a God.
Yes.
Is that God capable of both good and evil?
No, he can only do good.
How do you know that?
Because it makes sense. I mean, the scriptures tell us that, right? And it makes sense given what we see.
Whose scriptures?
What scriptures?
Scriptures say?
The scriptures. Okay, so the scriptures inspired the Old Testament and the New Testament, right?
Okay,
they make
so
the point
listen very carefully. If God, how can God know what good is if he doesn't know evil?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I know it is. That also demonstrates the problem with it in the abstract. What is your demonstration that this God exists?
Well, the same demonstration that you would have if you saw a car or a truck on a planet and you didn't see the intelligence that built it, you would still know that intelligence built that car or truck.
No,
right?
No, sir. You're incorrect. So first of all, we recognize design because there's evidence for design. We recognize it by contrasting it with that which occurs naturally. If I found a 57 Chevy on Venus, I would be wondering how it got there. But we know all of the available evidence of how 57 Chevys come into existence is from design, and there is no evidence to support them naturally occurring. Everything about reality, the evidence shows occurs naturally, and there is no evidence for an external supernatural designer.
There's no means to build the 57 Chevy without intelligence doing it. And in the same way, there's no means to build
No. We only know that 57 Chevys require what you're talking about there, the intelligence, because we've seen intelligence create that, and we've never seen it occur without intelligence. Do you have a universe you can point to that has only come about by intelligence?
I don't have the experience of what.
And so when you said that your evidence for God would be exactly the same as me for a designer if I came across a car on some other planet, you were wrong, because your evidence for God is that the universe appears designed, but you have no evidence that it is designed and no universe that you can contrast it with.
No, so we use the 57 Chevy as a simple example. We could just as well use a vehicle of foreign origin that we didn't build ourselves, that we had no experience seeing directly ever being designed.
Yes,
that we could.
And it would be because, yes, we could. And it would be because there is no evidence to show that thing could occur naturally. And there's evidence that shows that it could occur with an intelligence. Where is your evidence that the universe cannot occur naturally?
The machines that we're talking about.
Where is your evidence that the universe cannot occur naturally?
The same evidence. The evidence is that the machines that are the bodies of the animals require the same kind of intelligence to build that the other machines that we build require intelligence to build.
No, that is simply an assertion without any demonstration. Where is your evidence that life requires an intelligent designer? I'm sorry. Listen. Listen.
Yeah, sure.
Once upon a time, we didn't have an explanation for lightning, and we assumed it was God's, and then we learned stuff. Where is your evidence that the universe cannot occur naturally or did not exist forever?
It's the same evidence from the knowing that what it takes to build the machines that we build.
No, sir, it's not. And if you continue to flatly lie to me and say it's the same evidence, I'm going to end this conversation, because when we talk about things that are demonstrably designed by intelligence, it's because we can show the evidence that it happens that way, and we have no evidence that it could occur naturally. This is how we contrast a tree. So, for example, if you're out walking along a creek and you come across a bunch of sticks and mud damming up that creek, how do you tell if it was done by a beaver or by a natural flood process?
You would have to know kind of what beavers have done and compare it.
Correct. You would need to be able to look at what beavers have done and compare and contrast and say, these features, we have mountains of evidence typical for beavers and no evidence of this occurring naturally. And in this other instance, this is something that could occur naturally by a flood system and doesn't bear the hallmarks of a beaver. Do the same thing as that structure in the creek for the universe.
So I'm going to have to pause us here.
Sure.
We're coming up on a wall. We're going to have to stop the show. And Matt, there's been a scheduling issue where Jimmy is potentially wondering if you wanted to fill in for Javon on the next show. Or maybe they're just going to call it off. I'm not sure. But either way, we have to stop the show in the next 2 minutes. So wrap this up.
Okay. Sean, we're going to do another show.
Okay.
Call us there.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you.
I'd stick around, but I'm taking Natalie to go see the Odyssey on the big screen. It's
Let me
rare
know
I
how
go
it
to the
is.
theater anymore, but I'm going to the theater for this one. I hear it's a kick-ass movie, so we're headed
I'd love
out
to hear your
catch the
opinion
show.
on it, because I've heard various things.
Yeah. And we're going to go out on a date tonight, so.
Wow. I wish I could go out on a date soon. Arden's still recovering, so we're waiting until we can actually go out and have fun. Anyway, huge thank you to everybody for tuning in today. We're going to be kicking it over now to, is it calling it now or Cus I Wanna? I don't even know, Arden.
Looks like they're just going to, are they pulling the plug?
Yeah, Jimmy was gonna have Matt swap in, but then was thinking Jimmy would just hop in here, but was gonna need me to continue. And we've had an issue with our dog where I have to go take care of that, so it's just not possible. So I think they're just gonna pull the plug on the extra show.
Rain check.
Okay, rain check, everybody. Roll credits. Thanks, everybody.
And there's no more music, so sorry, it's all awkward watching the credits scroll all quiet.
My phone just did an alarm to tell me there's a TV show I have to go do.
Always look at the bright side of life. Wait, I'm out of key. Never mind. But you'll be in your head for the rest of the day. You're welcome.